right. Well, let's see. My name's James Pepper. Today is Wednesday, June 24th, 2026. It's 1:04 p.m. and I call this meeting to order. I did need to update the agenda. I'm just going to provide a little bit of context before I do it because I know it's a sensitive subject. In December, we took a vote to postpone any sort of action or discussion, further discussion about our equivalency chart, product equivalency chart, until July 1st of 2026. The thought was, we're getting a lot of feedback from the industry and legislators about this. They may want to actually legislate product equivalencies. They did not do that, but regardless, we kind of set the expectation that we would take this issue back up for discussion by July 1st. And, we're not going to have another opportunity between now and then. So I would like to add a agenda item, and I think I should put it right after public comment, about equivalencies and a possible vote to just further extend that date so that we can really dig into this issue and again, not change anything that's happening currently, but just push that date out a little bit further. So discussion and possible vote of product equivalencies. Any other updates to the agenda? No. Okay. All right. Well, I've got a few just brief remarks. I know it's a long agenda today. So there's been a lot of news at the federal level about rescheduling, but not a lot of clarity as to what it means for state cannabis markets and consumers of cannabis. The DEA, it's been reported, is starting to conduct on-site investigations of some of the licensees that registered with them. There's a good article in Marijuana Moment about a few dispensaries down in Mississippi. Those inspections have entailed DEA agents going on site and inspecting, detailed records on all aspects of the business, including inventory, transaction and sales data, compliance history with the state regulator, employee records, and security plans. They have not described what they intend to do with this data or what benefit is derived from registering with the DEA. I think most people assume that there'll be 280E tax relief, potentially retroactive 280E tax relief for business expenses related to sales of medical cannabis products to medical patients. There may be some allowance for interstate commerce of medical cannabis, but that is not spelled out anywhere, either from the Department of Justice nor the IRS. And even if that is the plan, it raises a number of questions related to what is a medical product? When does a generic cannabis product become a medical product? Whether the DEA may set criteria for who can qualify as a patient, for instance, in jurisdictions that have self-certification processes. What is the impact on licensees in the majority of adult use states that either permit or require that adult use retailers and medical use retailers be co-located? I mentioned before, there's no indication about the retroactivity application of the 280E deduction disallowance. There's no information about whether medical patients can deduct cannabis purchase as a medical expense deduction on their federal tax returns. So really, there's a lot up in the air about this whole process. Both the Department of Justice and the Treasury have indicated that they're going to publish guidance on some of these issues. That has not happened. All we have are these kind of big pronouncements in the federal registers with promises of more information to follow. Until there is clarity, the decision as to whether any individual business wants to engage with the DEA really needs to be a personal choice that hopefully will be made in consultation with a cannabis attorney and a cannabis tax professional. I will just give a little bit of information as to what we're doing at the CCB. just to be transparent about, what we're doing. We are currently working with our 45 members of our Regulators Association to compile and transmit to the IRS and the DEA the questions that we feel like we need to be answered to be included in any sort of guidance that they publish. We have engaged our Attorney General's office and the Governor's office on this issue, and we've sat through joint briefings with the National Governors Association and other Attorney General offices around the country. We've been in contact with key legislators regarding what state statutes may need to change in order for our licensed businesses here to actually benefit from this rescheduling decision. We've sought, 278, we'll talk about it. There is a provision in there that allows our governor to negotiate and enter into potential interstate commerce compacts if there is some allowance for interstate commerce. And we've petitioned, although we are denied, to participate in that June 29th hearing regarding rescheduling of cannabis more generally. On that topic, the DEA has also released a list of witnesses that will be participating at that hearing. And unfortunately, it doesn't include any state regulators. It doesn't, in fact, include any states that have an adult use cannabis market, which is unfortunate given that it's our industries that are going to be most likely impacted directly by this change. So our intention is to keep everyone informed through these regular meetings, in our weekly newsletters, on our website. Whenever we get concrete information that's relevant to our market. Julie, you were at the in-person CANRA meeting earlier this month. Mm-hmm. You attended a discussion with our state and federal, legislators and delegation yesterday. Is there anything that you want to add to any of these comments?
I think you covered it, Pepper. There is a lot of uncertainty, and I think you're going to talk about it later. But one of the things that came out of the conversation that we had yesterday was that it's important to, have a work group where people are sort of coalescing around the questions and sharing information as it comes out, and sort of having the, the relationships or the conversation or knowing who to reach out to when that information comes, if we get more information and guidance when it comes. So it was a good conversation yesterday in terms of, there's a lot that folks don't know. That was sort of the gist at CANRA too, is that people really don't have a lot of answers. They have more questions, but the kind of the types of questions are sort of forming into different sort of similar questions that I think we can look for answers as time goes on.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that. I would just note also there was a kind of roundtable discussion among some of the leading cannabis attorneys and professors and regulators that the Ohio State University Moritz School of Law put on last week. That's on YouTube. You can just Google that and watch that, and just to show that even the kind of mostly, the people that are deepest in this subject really have more questions than answers at this point. At the state level, the governor did sign both S-278, an act relating to cannabis, and S-323, an act relating to hemp. I'm going to be providing additional details about these bills further down the agenda. Also wanted to note that our fourth enhanced bud tender education training is tomorrow, June 25th, 9 a.m. All enrollees, all the people that were on the waiting list have received information as to how to participate in that. There's some instructions about pre-course work that should be completed to make sure that you're eligible and you have the appropriate links. So please kind of look through your emails, make sure you've completed all of that before tomorrow. Other than that, we just need to approve the minutes from our last regular board meeting, which was on May 27th, and our last special meeting, which was on June 10th. Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so I amended let's do public comment. So we'll handle this the same way we always do. If you join by the link, please raise your virtual hand. We're going to start with the folks that are in the room, move to the people that join by the link, and then go to people that join by a phone. So we have a few people in the room. Does anyone have a public comment? Go ahead.
Good morning, Chair and members of the board. My name is Samantha Webster, and I'm the former owner of Giving Tree Cannabis in Pollock. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. My purpose is to open communication regarding the possibility of relicensing Giving Tree Cannabis to better understand whether there may be a path forward within Vermont's current regulatory framework. I want to acknowledge openly that while Giving Tree Cannabis was operating, the business fell out of tax compliance. During my divorce, I discovered that my former husband, who was responsible for certain financial obligations of the business, had failed to make these required tax payments. Once the divorce was finalized and ownership of the business was transferred solely to me, I acted immediately within 30 days of the deed and ownership transfer, paid the outstanding tax obligations in full, and brought the business back into compliance. During divorce proceedings, my attorney communicated with counsel of the Cannabis Control Board regarding the future of the business. Based on those discussions, it was my understanding that if the ownership of Giving Tree was transferred solely to me and the outstanding tax obligations were satisfied, there would be no significant obstacles into renewing my license. I relied on that understanding in good faith when negotiating and finalizing my divorce settlement, making irreversible legal and financial decisions with the intentions of preserving the business and returning to full compliance. When I later learned that renewal would not be possible due to changes in the licensing landscape and the closure of retail application window, it was deeply disappointing. However, I recognize that Vermont's cannabis industry regulatory framework has evolved rapidly, and I appreciate the difficult work the board has undertaken in building and refining the system. I'm not here to assign blame or ask for special treatment. I'm here to ask for communication, clarity, and the opportunity to discuss whether there is a fair and reasonable path for Giving Tree Cannabis, a small, rural, woman-owned business that worked to correct its mistakes and comply with the law, to participate in Vermont's regulatory market once again. Thank you for your time, your service, and your consideration. I sincerely hope that this is the beginning of a construction conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to see some of you in person. Everyone else, for the record, my name is Jeffrey Pizzutello, Executive Director of Vermont Growers Association. I just want to follow up, and I'll be brief, one item on the rescheduling issue or chaos that's unfolding nationally. Thanks, Chair, for mentioning the event that took place yesterday in Essex. I was going to raise that myself if that was not raised. And I just want to speak to those that are listening or watching this on YouTube as an archived video. I want to share that Vermont Growers Association practices coalition advocacy. Many of you are familiar with our intrastate coalition that includes Nova Vermont, Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, Rural Vermont, Green Mountain Patients Alliance. In addition to that state level coalition, we are proud that we have formed over the years a national coalition as well that is called the National Craft Cannabis Coalition. It's comprised of several states throughout the country and like-minded trade associations. Vermont, we are part of that national coalition. And one thing that we did, I want to share with everybody, when this DOJ final order came down in April, was we took it upon ourselves, multiple states together working with technical experts and subject matter experts on this issue of rescheduling, what it exactly means. We took it upon ourselves to analyze this and scrutinize it and work with experts with the lens of what this means for state level small producers and small businesses. There's a lot of, I want to sort of characterize it as noise, or a lot of webinars and information that's out there since this April DOJ order came down. I urge those who are listening, please check out our Instagram page we have a really valuable white paper that we've been sharing with everybody that is specifically focused on what this means for those in Vermont and in other states, again, small producers and businesses. And in addition to that white paper that I urge you all to check out, we also held a webinar as well. May 26th was that webinar with some really interesting technical experts, some that are familiar with the DEA scheduling process. So there's some really valuable information there. And that video is also available through our Instagram page as well and through our website. So please check out that webinar in addition to everything else. This is specifically for small licensed producers and businesses. So thank you for your time. Have a good meeting, everybody.
Great, thank you. Anyone else for comment? Okay. Dave Silverman?
All right, thank you. And thank you for the DEA update. Important that the whole industry gets that kind of information in a timely fashion. And it's great that it's coming from you. I'm glad you added to the agenda the item on product equivalency. I was going to comment on that anyway. You know, the CCB went to the legislature in committee in both chambers and raised that issue. And you even, raised the sort of odd edge case scenarios that are allowed under current rules in terms of, the very large number of beverages that a person could buy in the 1 ounce equivalency. And you invited the committees to weigh in on that and to delve into whether they want to provide you with some sort of legislative guidance on product equivalencies. The industry weighed in as well with those committees and gave our views. And in response, the committees raised the purchase limits to 2 ounces, but did not give you any legislative guidance at all on the equivalencies. I think you should be taking that as pretty firm guidance from the legislature to keep things as they are, because if they wanted things differently, they would have told you so. But they were invited to and they declined. And I really would encourage you to not reopen that can of worms that created so much strife and distrust and just a lot of noise that in retrospect I think was quite unnecessary. And so that's my recommendation to you, is to defer this further, or perhaps indefinitely, or just not address it at all beyond what you already have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. Chris Lilly?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope you're all enjoying the first days of summer. I want to thank you for all of your work, as well as the work of the VGA. I'm grateful for all of you. I want to bring up a licensees relinquishment, because every meeting I hear we've lost, oh, not too bad, we lost a few, or now I think we're up to 100. And I just want to remind you that we're more than a license. We're people who have invested our livelihoods, our family stability, our hopes into this plant and this community. Every decision you make impacts real farmers who took real risks to build something meaningful here in Vermont. I appreciate all you do, and I hope we can keep working together to make this a little bit more stable. Thank you for your time and have a great day.
Thank you. Myra?
Hey, this is Myra with Hidden Leaf Homestead. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, great. I just wanted to start off by sharing a couple sections from the original Vermont statute that legalized cannabis, particularly regarding small cultivators. It states, It is the intent of the General Assembly to move as much of the illegal cannabis market as possible into the regulated market for the purposes of consumer protection and public safety. It is also the intent of the General Assembly to encourage participation, and of course my computer went to sleep while I was in the middle of reading that. Let's see, here we are.
These by small local farmers.
It's also the intent of the General Assembly to encourage participation in the regulated cannabis market by small local farmers. In furtherance of these goals, the board shall consider policies to promote small cultivators. The board shall consider the different needs and risks of small cultivators when adopting rules and shall make an exception or accommodation to such rules for cultivators of this size where appropriate. That said, I would like to thank the CCB for your support in getting direct sales into the last miscellaneous cannabis bill. Unfortunately, that section was removed from the bill by legislators without any meaningful discussion or debate. I would like to ask again for the CCB's support for direct-to-consumer sales next legislative session, and to share a quick story to help emphasize its need. I attended NECAM Vermont and had the realization that the people attending could not purchase any Vermont genetics from the cultivators present, but they could purchase seeds and clones from out of state from non-regulated vendors. For those against direct sales, please ask them to consider the following questions. How does this make any sense? How does this encourage participation in the regulated cannabis market? And how does this restriction support the needs of small Vermont cultivators and support public safety? Thank you.
Thank you, Myra. Next on my list is Sarah Farnsworth.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Farnsworth. I own and operate Full Circle Farm, a Tier 3 outdoor cultivation business, and I'm also part of Vermont Producers Joint, a producer-owned cooperative formed to help small producers survive in this market. I want to start by acknowledging that the board has done important work in a difficult and evolving market. I appreciate the executive reports because they help show what many of us are experiencing on the ground. And I appreciate that the board is now in a position to shape event rules and make recommendations to the legislature. That makes this a really important moment to focus on small producer market access. This market, as Myra said, was built with the intent of supporting small Vermont producers, creating local opportunity, and bringing cannabis sales that had existed outside regulation into a legal, tested, tracked, and accountable system. But if the regulated market does not create real pathways for small producers to reach customers, then we're not fulfilling that promise. The board's own executive reports already show the problem. Cultivators are leaving the market, and the smallest tiers are carrying a significant share of that harm. So I do not think the question is whether small cultivators are in trouble. The question is whether we are willing to name the market access barriers causing it and act before more small farms disappear. One of those barriers is shelf access. I hear from small cultivators who are contacting dispensaries over and over and still cannot get meaningful placements. That is not just an individual sales problem. It's a structural market problem. Whether the barrier is shelf trading, pay-to-play expectations, exclusive relationships, affiliated ownership, overcrowded shelves, or retailers understandably relying on larger and more established suppliers, the outcome can be the same. Small producers are locked out of the only legal path they currently have to reach customers. A license without market access is not a real opportunity. At the same time, many of these small cultivators do have community members who want to buy their products. They have local relationships, local trust, and people asking to purchase from them. But under the current system, those potential customers cannot legally purchase directly from the farms they know and want to support. Small cultivators may be one of Vermont's best opportunities to bring more consumers and more sales into the regulated market. If people already know and trust a local producer and they want to support that farm, Vermont should be creating a legal and regulated pathway for that sale to happen. Small cultivators are already operating inside a highly regulated system. They're already doing inventory tracking, sales documentation, seed to sale reporting, testing compliance, packaging and labeling, manifest, deliveries, record keeping, and state and federal tax reporting. I understand that point of sale systems, tax collection, and retail compliance are real concerns. Retailers have invested significant money and labor into those systems, and that should be acknowledged. But a limited direct-to-consumer pathway for cultivators does not need to be built as a full retail model. It can be designed as a scale-appropriate sales channel with clear requirements for receipts, inventory reconciliation, purchase limits, tax collection, reporting, and approved sales software if absolutely needed. Adding point of sale reporting or tax collection would be another compliance step, but it is not outside the scope of work these producers are already doing. The board can design requirements that are accountable without making them so expensive that only the most capitalized businesses can participate. I also want to be clear that direct-to-consumer access should not be designed as an unregulated workaround or a race to the bottom. If Vermont creates a DTC pathway for cultivators, it should include fair market and trade practice standards from the beginning. That could include clear rules around advertising, discounts, inducements, pricing practices, reporting, and tax collection, so DTC supports market access without undercutting retailers who have already made significant investments in the regulated system. I also want to speak directly to the event permit rules the board is now developing. Because the event permit structure runs through retailers, there is a real risk that events could recreate the same shelf access problem in a different location. If retailers control the permit, the menu, the producer selection, and the consumer relationship, then small cultivators may still be left outside looking in. I'm asking the board to build small cultivator access directly into the event framework. Event applications should include a clear product sale and producer participation plan explaining how Tier 1 and 2 cultivators, social equity licenses, economic empowerment licenses, and independent small producers will be included. Small cultivators should be able to present, talk about their farms, educate consumers, and build consumer relationships. The board should also collect event data by producer, license tier, affiliated or independent status, and sales volume, so the report to the legislature shows whether events actually improved market access for the licenses most harmed by the current structure. This market was built with the intent of creating a fair, local, Vermont-based cannabis economy rooted in small producers, equity, and rural communities. But we have strayed far from that intent. I'm asking the board to act now. Study shelf access. Design event rules that intentionally include disproportionately impacted licenses, and prepare a clear recommendation for a regulated, scale-appropriate, direct-to-consumer model for cultivators that includes fair market and trade practice standards from the start. And if the board is not ready to support direct-to-consumer access, then I'm asking you to reopen the retail application window because the current system is closing off opportunity instead of creating it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah, if those were written comments, do you mind sending them to me?
I read something. I would be happy to share that with you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I second that? Can you just send it to the full board, Sarah?
Of course.
Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? And if you joined by phone, you can hit *6 to unmute yourself. Sure, yeah.
Hi. My name is Cynthia Pudan Silva. I'm the co-founder of Snowbird Botanicals along with Ivan Pudan up in Barnet. I'm also the chair of the VGA Cultivator Working Group, as you've heard from some others, Sarah, Chris, Myra, Jeffrey here as well works with us towards creating a sustainable craft market here in Vermont for cannabis. We were one of the first farms to get licensed in Vermont, and it was a huge celebration when it happened. We already had 2 years of work of hemp behind us, and we were just ready to hit that cannabis market. And in the beginning, we really did work with the CCB, and it felt like we could see remnants of conversations we had appearing in the legislature and appearing in the regulations, and things like plant count versus canopy, things that are now offered as like option, pick one or the other. Understanding more behind how growing actually works and what's possible and what's not. And it felt like a side-by-side journey. And over time, it starts to feel, especially with the way this last bill went, that it feels like we're screaming into a void. It's like if events were kind of coming up looking like it was going to be kind of favoring small cultivators and like leaving retailers out, for it to flip into retailers are getting events and no cultivators are getting events, when many of us operate on our own farms. Many of us have neighbors that want to come visit. Many of us have people that want to join something like a CSA for our products, or for things like a farmer's market that we can participate in. The first thing we're always explaining to everybody right after explaining we have a cannabis farm is explaining that we can't sell directly to consumers and that we can only sell directly to stores. And we're kind of at the mercy of their ebbs and flows when they have big tax payments due, when they can't get orders in, when they're not, filling up stock at the moment for a certain level of months because of how taxes break down, because of the cash flow nature of this, product. And really all of it stemming from stigma, because there is no difference between agriculture and cannabis. And we have the framework to follow from agriculture to cannabis for things like farmers markets, for things like a CSA. And the only things holding us back from it are the stigma. And the issue is just at the end of the day that it doesn't get the same treatment as something that's getting raised and cultivated in the same way, like plants and vegetables. And we know that those are things that make sense. And so we just want to get back on the same page of working together and kind of seeing at least, okay, if this is the framework of how the bill is working out, or if this is kind of the points being made, it doesn't flip to the complete opposite on the other side. That doesn't make sense to anyone anywhere. And this is going to be a unified front of us opening the lines of communication in good faith, that the things we say are really being heard, because it's really about what you want the Vermont cannabis market to look like in even a year from now, 2 years from now. You're not going to be seeing farms like me anymore. You're not going to be seeing tier 1 farms. We aren't going to be able to survive. Like they were talking about the shelf trading. In alcohol, there are laws and regulations against that. We have the framework that can lend to all of these problems. Like these challenges are not insurmountable. We can reach, I think, a fair, even ground between everything. And I think we really can achieve some sustainability here that we can be proud of, like you can for other craft markets of Vermont that we're known for, like cheese and maple syrup, things like that. Even its own farming and agriculture really stands out in Vermont. We uprooted our entire lives. We left our families behind when we come from cultures that are very family oriented. And really, like Chris said, like you give up everything to do this, and you kind of hope that this is going to be more collaborative than combative. We don't want to be like with pitchforks coming out and like yelling at each other. We just want to be heard. And it just feels the way this last bill went out was the complete opposite. And so we are now trying to become a more unified front for you to know it's not just one farm, it's not 2 farms. It's a lot of us. It's most of us. And we'll be looking for producers that have also not been able to make it in this market. We want you guys to hear from the other side of that, but just know that, like Chris said, each one of those closures is devastating in its own way to everyone, every level. So we just would like to to get to a better place with the CCB. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. May I just have a quick? Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys. I know.
My name is Travis Foley. I am part of Full Spectrum Botanics up in the town of Wheelock, Vermont. We're a tier 1 mixed cultivator, and we're going into our 4th season of outdoor growing. So we're going for it. I just wanted to throw a couple things out there that sort of intermingle with a lot of things that other people are saying as well, and eventually leading to possible direct to consumer from our farm establishments. One of them is a possibility to rethink another license tier for cultivators, being more of a farmstead license that possibly sort of gets things more in line with what a lot of us tier 1s are doing. I know for ourselves, we don't max out our 1,000 square feet indoor, nor do we want to do that. It's not sustainable for us energy wise, and for the amount of work that it would take, and possibly not be able to see returns getting that product to the market. I'd like it to include possibly a smaller number of plants outdoors, possibly a smaller number of canopy space inside. And I think it would be beneficial to also be able to manufacture products on a small scale off of our farm through manufacturing, whether that be our own hash making and developing other products. We get lost in the shuffle working with other people. Weeks and weeks and weeks go by. Then another week goes by, then another week goes by, and all of a sudden we're in the middle of June, we're in the middle of July, and we haven't been able to even get our products to the market, and time's ticking. We've already got plants in the ground for next season, for this season to come into next season. I also think kind of integrating the what's the other license? It's the
Wholesale.
it's not wholesale, it's propagation license. I always forget that word, sorry. I think that having that be included as well gives us an opportunity not only to share our genetics that we're working on with other people, but being more of a real-time application for us to be allowed a little bit more of experimentation. Boots on the ground at the farm, it takes a lot to hunt out some of these strains, to develop these strains. There are years in the making, and doing that all under the construct of a small plant count outdoors when none of this is actually making it to market is kind of hurtful to us as well. I don't know necessarily if I want to sell clones to everybody, but to be able to sell seeds produced off my farm and be able to share those genetics with other people, I think would be awesome. So if that could all be included in one smaller farmstead license, I don't know what it would look like, if it makes sense at all on your end. I don't know if anybody else would be interested in it. I don't know. But I think it definitely could work for us at our scale. And eventually leading into direct to consumer from our farm. It's everything is happening on our land, happening off of our property. Everything we do, all our energy is going into that. And to be able to eventually say, hey, we have everything under control in our place, and we're allowed to share that with everybody else from our location, I think would be key. The other idea that I've had, and I don't know, it's another big one I'm throwing out there, but it'd be interesting to see if the state wanted to get involved and possibly put up 4 places throughout the entire state to have everybody be able to have access. And maybe they should take over a farmer's market model and be able to open these places up so that small cultivators can come in on a weekend. You can have 10 to 15 people come in, state regulated, let you kind of put it out on the, you guys take a little bit of the risk and try to like weed out some of the things that are going to be involved with that, but allow those farmers markets to happen so that the small cultivators can have a little more access to get our products out there. We all are struggling all the way up from the top to the bottom, and I feel for everybody that's in it. I'm just speaking from us and our capacity of what we're able to handle. So that's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? I see one hand raised. Just a reminder, just raise your virtual hand or hit *6 on mute your phone. But Chelsea Wright. You there, Chelsea? All right. Oh, Chelsea, we'll come back to you if your hand goes back up, and I'll move to Andy. Andy, are you able
Thank
to?
you very much. Yeah, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm not prepared for a long response to the growers' clear coordinated campaign today. We're a retailer. We also have a manufacturer's license. We absolutely respect our growers. We made our retail store look like an agricultural entity because of the respect. We keep keep cannabis fresh with Cannatrol systems, so it's fresh from farm to the customer. We believe as an industry that we need resolutions and solutions that benefit everyone in the entire industry and don't benefit one vertical of the industry at the absolute expense of another. With all due respect, the S278 started out with outlining a pilot model for delivery, but that would eventually be for all tier 1 and tier 2 manufacturers and growers to have direct delivery to customers. There are 385 tier 1 and tier 2 manufacturers and growers licensed today, or it was I think I looked at the April numbers. There are only 110 retailers. There's a moratorium right now on retail because retailers have been too clustered and there's so much oversaturation. Economically, think about that. 385 new effective retailers being able to sell directly to customers. There was nothing in there about pricing that could be at the same wholesale prices that go to the retailers. It would decimate the retail market. It would be an absolute race to the bottom, like occurs in other states. I have a cannabis investment fund. I've been investing outside of Vermont since 2014. I see what happens in other states. I would be very happy to share. I did an analysis, a very in-depth analysis of what happens for delivery in every other state, and what was being asked for in Vermont is absolutely does not occur anywhere else, and they are much more successful, larger markets than us that have been longer, because it would decimate the industry. It doesn't make economic sense, and it hurts others. Last, if growers want to sell, then I assume that my retail license will now be allowed to grow and manufacture. We can't just have one vertical be given all of these not obligations, rights that others don't have. We want to work with the growers on figuring out a solution. Going from 1 ounce to 2 ounce dealing, that helps the entire industry. I bet everyone agrees on one thing. The biggest problem for all of us that are licensed is the unlicensed illicit market. If we got rid of that, we'd all be able to actually make money. And we wouldn't have to keep putting money into our businesses just to make payroll, as some of us are doing right now. So please, let's work together and not try to benefit one vertical that will absolutely, clearly, very foreseeably, economically decimate another, and in effect, decimate the entire market. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Anyone else? All right, I will close the public comment window. Thank you all. We got one more slip in. Prescott. You there? Prescott Small, SFCC.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, my mute button didn't work. I just wanted to add some comments. I agree with just about everything that was said on the tier one side of business. It is very, very difficult to make margins meet, especially as bills like energy and all that is going way, way up. I would love to be able to do direct sales, but I have no interest in doing it all the time. I do have neighbors that ask me, are they going to let us do it? Are they going to let us do it? Almost all the time. And they're like, can I follow you to the retailer and buy your stuff? That's kind of ridiculous. I would like to be able to maybe do a small amount of direct sales, maybe have people that stop by. We live off Kingdom Trail, so we get a ton of bicycle traffic through here. It'd be nice to maybe do tours and sell a little thing and maybe sell a t-shirt or something, but I have no interest in having a full-blown retail operation and doing that every day. I don't have time for that. I'm growing plants, I'm processing material, and I'm manufacturing, and there's just two of us. So there's no time in the day for that kind of thing, but we do need to find a way to increase our margins. And then add to that, it seems like the legislature says a lot of good things, but when it comes down to voting, they don't. And that's very frustrating. It seems like they nod their head like they're listening to us, but when they vote, we don't get the results we're looking for. And I was really hoping you guys would be more active and aggressive in your advocacy for the entire business. Because I'm afraid that worst case, we see this whole industry in Vermont collapse because nobody can afford to operate. The insurance is insane. Electricity is insane. Gas is getting insane. How are we supposed to survive? And I think you guys need to do some real soul searching and advocate for it. And that's all I got to say.
Prescott. All right, I will close the public comment window. Thank you for all that. It is helpful to, oh, sorry guys, Chelsea did have her hand raised. Chelsea, do you want to give it another shot? Chelsea, we can't hear you if you're talking. All right, Chelsea, there seems to be some kind of issue. We do have a web form where you can submit public comments. Again, those go straight to our inboxes. We see them all, we read them all. And if you want to just give us a written comment, you can do that on our just homepage of our website, ccb.vermont.gov. Sorry about that. All right, so moving down the agenda, this is, we did update our agenda to include a discussion about equivalencies. We're a little bit behind schedule. Dave Silverman is correct that we did ask the legislature to look at this issue. We kind of explained to them how difficult it is to do, and that,
There's many different ways to do it.
Many different ways to do it. Ultimately, it's going to be somewhat arbitrary. And when it comes to kind of just arbitrarily setting limits, it's better for a political body to do than a regulatory body. And they didn't do it. They did raise the transaction limit on flour to 2 ounces. What I think that the best path forward to do would be to just extend the existing product equivalency, which I think is 8,400 milligrams, until at least the fall. And in the meantime, set up a working group of, cultivators, retailers, manufacturers, wholesalers, public health folks, they want to join the conversation about what appropriate product equivalencies should be, that are kind of at least in the ballpark equivalent to 2 ounces of cannabis. Happy to do that. I mean, I think what's motivating this, just so we're all on the same page, is, retailers, Dutchie, Flow Hub, they need to update these kind of caps in their system so that you can't sell above them. And what I don't want to do is have them do that twice. Sure. Essentially have to, us set something and then we have this working group work on this and then have them have to change it all again. So I don't know if you guys want to comment on that at all.
I think it's a great idea. I recognize how some folks last time the equivalency stuff came up kind of were caught off guard a little bit. And I think our staff did do a reasonable job in trying to figure out a through line, but it's hard to please everybody. I think including everybody from the jump and sharing our concerns and different paths for this and how other states have looked to kind of, whether it's from a straight mathematical equation or something that's rooted more in how consumers shop from a market basket perspective. There's a lot of different approaches that I think information sharing would be valuable, especially with our staff and the regulated community.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think particularly doing it through a work group approach helps get some, I don't know, better understand the impact of all the different ideas and different ways that you can do this.
Okay, so I think I'd like a motion to extend our existing product equivalency transaction limit through September 30th.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep. I move that the board continue the current product equivalency transaction limit in force through September 30th, 2026.
Second.
Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All right. Yeah, I mean, I'm moving down the agenda as a legislative update. I just do need to stress that we are not an advocacy organization. We are regulators. Our job is to effectively implement the laws that are given to us. We do sometimes get asked our opinion about things, about things like potency caps and are they effective at, achieving public health metrics, things like that. We get asked to evaluate their impact on the illicit market. So sometimes our work sounds like advocacy, but it's usually just because the legislature has said, you guys convene a working group and give us your opinion as to what's the best solution here, make certain recommendations. The decision to, we gave the legislature a lot of information about why they may want to consider reducing licensing fees for certain categories of licenses. And they took that, sometimes we do, it looks like advocacy, but really it's in response to, the legislature requesting it. It really is up to individuals and trade associations to do the advocacy work. We can only operate within the sandbox that we've been given. So,
and just to remind folks that the legislature doesn't take every single one of our recommendations and puts it into law. Case in point, we asked for some direction on equivalency guidance. We didn't get anything. We've told the legislature for years that the potency cap should be lifted. That hasn't happened yet either. So I certainly hear the concerns of a lot of different individuals and trade groups about how the board needs to do X, Y, and Z. I hear you 100%. It's going to take all of us, though, to kind of present ideas in a way that, we're all in our lanes, but we're crossing back and forth from time to time. So it's a challenge to kind of move these novel concepts into the law. But we all have to kind of work together within our respective roles to do so.
I'm going to start with 278. Despite this bill originating in the Senate and more specifically the Senate Economic Development Committee, which usually takes a lens of market expansion, we ultimately saw a very similar dynamic play out from past years where the House rejected much of the market expansion ideas. And then because they held on to the bill for so long, there was no time for meaningful floor debate. There was no time for a conference committee. But I do think that there are a few bright spots in this bill. I will just pull up a little presentation. I'll have Patrick post this presentation to our website later. All right. So some sections got deleted from 278. So that's why you see gaps in the kind of bill review. Section 1 was deleted. For instance, it was around, I think, the delivery pilot or the per container limits. Section 2, as has been noted a few times, increased the transaction limit, the single transaction limit, how much a consumer can purchase in a single transaction from 1 ounce or its equivalent in cannabis products to 2 ounces. This is effective July 1st. Sections 3 and 4 just made corresponding changes to the criminal laws and civil penalties associated with possessing that much cannabis, so that people effectively can purchase that without risk of being in civil violation. Section 5 establishes this cannabis event pilot. Some of the key provisions. It's a 2-year pilot with a maximum of 10 events. The events include sales, but cannot include consumption of cannabis or alcohol. They can only happen in towns that have opted in to retail. The person who's receiving the permit has to be a retail establishment in good standing. The board was given a tremendous amount of latitude in designing these things. They kind of gave us a broad branch of authority over the security, products that can be sold, insurance requirements, health and safety requirements. They gave the local control commissions additional authority to condition a permit on public safety, managing traffic and nuisance abatement. And then they really wanted us to get started quickly on these events. So instead of pushing us through the traditional rulemaking process, they said that we can create procedures that have the force of law. And that's a kind of rare grant of authority that they give. They did condition that a little bit. They said that the procedures need to be published and on our website, and we have to have 2 public hearings about them. And we have to kind of take into consideration the comments that we receive through that, notice of comment period. The fee for this is $500, and that's split evenly between the town and the Cannabis Control Board. So what I would say about this event pilot is, we were involved all throughout this year's conversations and last year's conversations. I know no one, I know this idea that it runs through a retail license was controversial last year. It was controversial this year. This was kind of pitched as a way to pilot on-farm sales. And, in New York, these are called cannabis grower showcases. So I think we're going to need is a lot of help from the public, from interested people on how we can design these things in a way that is equitable and it does achieve some of the goals, if they're not explicitly stated in this legislation, were part of the conversation throughout, were part of the conversation last year. Section 10A, this reduces the outdoor cultivation fees by half. In most instances, I got to say tier 2, it's a little bit more than half, but that was just because it would have created kind of an awkward decimal point if they did it a straight halving. But this is also, I need to note, is effective July 1, 2027. So because this was going to create a gap in our budget, and the budget had already passed, they kicked this out a year. And also, I should note, it does not apply to the outdoor portion of the mixed tier cultivation. Section 12, we collect a $100 fee. It's for the town. We normally distribute it quarterly. This allows us to do it annually. Section 12A, This allows the board to enforce administrative penalties by way of a civil collection action. This is a pretty standard authorization that other agencies that can assess administrative penalties have. Section 13 extends the term of a cannabis employee card from 1 year to 2 years, and it allows the board to identify categories of products that can have longer product registrations than just 1 year. Both of these, I should say, the 2-year employee ID card, these are all prorated. So, and the 2-year is not a 2-year option. It is just starting at July 1, 2027. Employees will now have to pay $100 for their card, but it'll be good for a term of 2 years instead of 1. And then the product registrations, the ones that have a longer registration period, that will be prorated as well. If we say, for instance, all topicals or tinctures have a 2-year product registration, that registration fee, which is $50, will be $100. Sections 11, 14 through 22, they just strike all references to integrated licensees. This is a specialty license that was created for the existing medical dispensaries that existed prior to tax and regulate. They were required to be integrated. So the legislature created these integrated licenses. They were only available to them. They've all now been relinquished. So this is really just a housekeeping measure, getting rid of those references to integrated licenses. Section 24, this is pretty technical, but this actually does have a financial benefit to certain kind of eligible entities. This applies to individual cannabis business owners who can claim a property tax credit. This change allows you to deduct the cost of goods sold when you're determining your household income, meaning that you'll get greater property tax relief if you're an eligible business. It's not a huge amount of money. The tax department concluded that this is about $35,000 across all eligible entities spread across that, but every little bit helps. The tax department is currently updating their cannabis tax guidance document to reflect how people can claim this or how they should navigate this. They're working with Patrick to make sure that we communicate this information out to the industry. Section 25 clarifies when an outdoor cannabis cultivator can qualify for current use and sales tax exemptions. This is really just trying to clarify ambiguous language in the statutes. This shouldn't have an impact on anyone because the tax department is already enforcing these current use and sales tax exemptions the way under their interpretation. This is just making sure the statutes match their interpretation. So this really shouldn't be a change to anyone. Section 26 just allows for better information sharing between the Department of Taxes and the Cannabis Control Board regarding sales that are occurring at medical use endorsed retailers to medical patients. 27 just allows cannabis cultivators to form a cooperative. This just adds, cannabis cultivators into an existing statute around, the cooperatives. Section 27A, 27B, this authorizes the governor to negotiate and enter into compacts with other states for the purpose of interstate commerce of cannabis and cannabis products. And it's effective July 1, but this is actually can only happen if one of 4 triggers is hit. One, I won't go through all 4, they're in the law, but essentially if there's change at the federal status to cannabis or the Department of Justice that would authorize interstate commerce, this allows the governor to negotiate all aspects of what that might look like. For instance, health and safety standards of products that are coming in, what sort of packaging and labeling requirements are those products going to need? How are we going to handle product tracking and recalls of products, destructions of products when necessary, tax collection and remission, just kind of the nuts and bolts of how interstate commerce might work. Section
Do
30
I,
and
can I interrupt for a second, Pepper? Do I
Yeah.
remember that puts anything to do with a compact would start in the governor's office, right?
right.
That's like,
Yep.
it's would be up to the governor to decide whether or not to move forward with something like that.
Right. The governor determines that one of these triggers has occurred, and then they will begin the negotiation. And there's a long process about how they need to incorporate stakeholder feedback and publish, notice and comment periods of those negotiated compacts.
Okay, I just thought that'd be helpful to be clear about that. Thank you.
Yeah. Sections 30 and 31 just prevents landlords from essentially prohibiting the possession and use of certain types of cannabis products in residential lease agreements. So that's it for S273. S323, an act relating to miscellaneous agricultural subjects. This has a couple of sections towards the end related to hemp. The main thing that it does is it shifts oversight of hemp processors from the Agency of Agriculture to the CCB. It authorizes rulemaking, very similar to what we have in the cannabis statutes over licensing, testing, labeling, additives, intermediaries, co-location of hemp and cannabis product manufacturers. It sets fees. The producer really means the grower. And again, we're not taking regulation over growers back. That's currently with USDA. It's just allowing us to, when we see a field of what looks like cannabis, but the person is saying it's hemp, the ability for us to, go on and test it and make sure it is actually hemp. The main, thrust of this regulation is around processor regulation. There is a product registration fee. There's a lot of changes happening to hemp federally, and we're not going to know much about how the kind of dust is going to settle until after November, when a major change to the definition of hemp and hemp products is set to take effect. As a result, we don't know whether we're going to have a kind of robust interstate market, which we have currently, or whether this is going to be purely kind of like the cannabis market within the confines of the state. So the legislature granted us broad authority to define what a craft processor is, and to waive or reduce regulations and fees for this class of processors, very similar to what we have for tier 1 cultivators. It also, like I just mentioned on the kind of 2-year product registration, it allows us to identify classes of products and either just move them totally outside of product registration or extend their registration terms. And then really importantly, I know a lot of people have said, I wish that we could, do more about the illicit market. And, this gives us, this adds any unregistered product containing THC to the delivery sales ban. And it's focused on hemp products, but I think it could apply broadly to products containing large amounts of THC. People that are kind of shipping their products through the mail, it gives us some authority to stop that from happening. So, yep.
Does this also provide some clarity for folks who wanted to do both THC and like CBD products? Oh, I didn't realize I asked a complicated question.
Well, what do you mean exactly?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what you mean.
It does
Well,
allow
just people who wanted to do both. Like we hear all the time about people who want to do both. Will this provide some clarity on various different paths for people who want to do create different types of products?
So it gives us, again, a broad grant of authority over the co-location of hemp and cannabis product manufacturers.
Yeah. Okay.
So if there's a facility that wants to do a line of low THC hemp beverages, for part of the year, and high THC cannabis beverages for a different part of the year, this authorizes us to create rules around that.
Okay. Thank you.
I think what it does is it fills a gap in regulatory oversight from the hemp manufacturing space. And, as Pepper alluded to, we don't know what's going to happen in November. And we don't know, if we're just intrastate, craft processor means one thing. If we're competing with other states, craft processor may mean another thing. And we need help figuring out what all this means.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
What are the next steps for these? I think the best thing that we can do is create implementation work groups. I know that some of these topics are not probably as relevant to some people as others. So I'm thinking that we need to have a cannabis product equivalencies work group. And I would probably add to that the extended product registration to, so just maybe a cannabis products work group, an event pilot work group, and a hemp work group. And then Julie, I know that, I think it makes sense. You mentioned it earlier to just have a rescheduling work group as well. I think that's somewhat separate to an implementation work group, but rescheduling, we're getting information maybe in drips and drabs. People don't know what to rely on. There's a lot of, what seems to be people anticipating what some of these changes might mean, but in presenting it as fact. So, having a rescheduling work group where we can kind of separate fact from fiction, get people all on the same page would be helpful. I don't know explicitly how to structure these at this point, whether they should be, the three of us together or us on our own or in person or virtual or hybrid, whatever else. But I do want to solicit interest from whoever's paying attention to us right now, that I'd like to get these things going quickly. So if anyone listening or watching this after the fact would like to participate in one of these work groups, I'd like for you to email ccb.info@vermont.gov. In the subject line, just write work group or something that can clearly kind of separate these out from all the other emails that come to that inbox. And in the body, just, your name, your contact information, and the whatever kind of area of interest is most relevant to you. And I think that will help get this stuff going in a way that's transparent and, achieves the needs of the market.
I think it's a great idea. And just conceptually for everybody, I think, and I'll focus on events, I guess, as my example, just because we've heard about events in our public commenting a little bit today. The law passed with what it is. We have these broad parameters that we have to work through. I recognize that certain people were not happy with how that ended up, but it's the deck of cards we've been built. There's going to be a lot of different perspectives that are brought to how these should operate. We heard a little bit about that today. I think it would be helpful from an opening perspective is to think about how you envision one of these events happening. We can only do 10 over a 2-year period. So understanding which event's going to pass muster and how we're going to do that is important. What I hope we can leave on the sidelines is I don't want to be a referee handing out yellow cards in the spirit of the World Cup before things getting a little bit too tense based on different views that people have about retailers versus cultivators. Like, it doesn't need to be this us versus them mentality. How can we work together? Does that mean I'm just spitballing here, every application needs to include X amount of small cultivators or social equity businesses? Or does your application mean something more if you choose to include them? Like, these concepts of how we kind of work to, cross some bridges to kind of make this a fruitful event for the smallest and most vulnerable of our licensees, while recognizing that it has to flow through a retailer. So food for thought. I think it's helpful if people come with some of those kind of ground rules and just tell us what your vision is going to be, and we can reverse engineer some things as we kind of coalesce around certain concepts.
It's great. Yeah, totally agree. The sooner we can get to work, the better on some of this stuff, because the legislature is expecting report backs and, a lot of, I think, one thing that we saw is that the Senate wants to lift this 10, event cap immediately, as long as they're working well, as long as they're going well. I think the House could be persuaded to lift it if they are going well. There aren't any problems. So, all right, Julie, you're up next on retail citing. Oh, sorry. No, never mind. Product registration guidance.
Okay. I've got PR guidance, and I'm joined by, I think, Alex and Andy from the PR team. I'm on a really small screen, so if you guys have anything to add, I hope you will, but you'll have to just start talking because I can't see hands or anything like that. But I'm going to try to move you to a full screen. What I'm going to show you is red line markup of the product registration guidance. Like all guidance updates, this should arrive by way of clarification and sort of modernization to address, how certain issues can be dealt with, but it shouldn't be an announcement of any new rule. That really isn't what guidance is for. So I'm going to put this up on full screen and walk you through from top to bottom. Alex and Andy, when we get to parts of interest to you, please just start talking because I won't be able to see you. But here's your screen. Okay, can you see that?
Nope.
Okay. So the first change, so this will look familiar to everybody who works with it. This is the guidance on product labeling and product registration.
No, we can't see it, Gabe.
Hold on a second. Maybe I wasn't clear. We can't see it.
Oh,
So hold on
sorry.
1 second. Well,
I can bring it up if you'd like.
Are you trying to share it, Gabe, through your whole screen or through Teams?
I think I've just got to shrink it. That's okay.
Okay.
Countdown music banner.
Nope. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna have to bring it up in a Teams tab. It'll just be 1 second.
I can pull it up, Gabe. You want to just tell me when to scroll?
Okay, sure. If you want to do that, I guess that'll work best. Thanks. Okay, so beginning at the introduction, you can see there's just a change to the introduction to introduce a new Appendix C that we'll get to later. It doesn't do anything substantive, but tell you what to expect. Okay, there's some new guidance on naming registration submissions. The goal of the guidance really is to keep clean data on our end. I think Alex and Andy, as they're working with these, have realized that some of their ability to sort data, turns on naming conventions, and the more consistent the naming conventions they have, the more detail they can have. In the greater detail, they can analyze their PR data in. So what we have are some naming conventions that they're asking you to adopt when naming things in the product registration system. So I think we're ready to, so there's an explanation of why that is, but and then there are illustrations of the conventions that they would like to see. I see it's rendering a little bit wild there, but I can assure you the actual document, it does not look like that, but it gives illustrations of the various product types. So they'll work with PR submitters, but if PR submitters and people that are entering names into the PR system would have a look at this new section, it should tell you everything you need to know. And cooperation on that will enable us to know more about what's selling and be able to dig more deeply and with better accuracy into our data. So that's all that you've got going on there.
It looks like Mike may want to add a little something.
No, I was just going to say, these are the naming conventions right here, this table.
Unfortunately, it's a little flat.
Yeah.
Gabe, does this change anything about the label, or is this just within the product registration system itself?
I think it's mostly within the product registration system. I'm not sure that the PR guys want to see tremendous variation between the name given in the system and the name on the label, but I can let Mike speak to that.
That's correct. It's just for entering products into the product registration system.
But it's, you know, the goal is not telling people what to do on their labels so much as keeping our data clean on the back end. And then infused pre-roll and flower, there's just a reminder here that unique registration is required for each distinct combination of inputs and each distinct product net weight. There's a clarification that formulation is one kind of a change that would require a different registration for vapes, but that's kind of common sense to people, so it's really just a cleanup. Here you see that we had merged edibles and tinctures into one bullet. They're different products, they're different product categories, so we've broken them out here. There's nothing too drastic about that. It's just sort of by way of cleanup. Here you'll see some minor changes. You know, telling people to use 10-point font without anything else is not that meaningful. And so nothing has changed about the basic principle. The basic principle is a person using the unaided eye ought to be able to read the message. If the message is so small as rendered that you need a magnifying glass, it would be very difficult for a person with ordinary eyesight to read it. Not quite enough, but nothing's really changing there. Just the way we describe what adequacy means in terms of having label text big enough hasn't been a big problem. Usually, you know, on rare occasion, if something comes out very small in product review or in advertising review, folks will be asked to enlarge it a little, but that's shouldn't change anything of substance for anybody. Okay. So the cannabis flower packaging has been revised to clarify that a complete process lot exactly as assigned in the inventory tracking system has to be on the label. For reasons that escape me a little bit, I think there had been some variation between the way people were labeling their lots in the system versus on labels. This just clarifies that they should match exactly.
Mike, do you want to add any color as to?
That's correct. That's basically the gist of it. Just want, you know, in the past, some cultivators had just created their own process lots in their own internal tracking systems, and we're just wanting to ensure that the process lot and label matches what comes out of our system.
We've taken out the little exception for sifted keef here. That really follows on a discussion we had of keef over the last couple of months. So nothing new there, just bringing this up to speed with that. Okay, there was a little bit of the law has changed and the regs have changed a little bit around the dating conventions and requirements. And there was some realization by everybody who works with these that we were conflating a little bit the dating conventions required of flower and pre-rolls, which are kind of belong to one category, with the dating conventions for manufactured products, which belong in another. So what you see is some edits just meant to straighten that out a little bit. So we talk about it manufactured on date for manufactured products, not a packed on date. And then the presumptive best if used by date, there's a lot of, you know, I think the PR team feels a lot of questions about how am I supposed to compute this best if used by date. Their view is that it's a presumptive 2 years. If a manufacturer can come forward with shelf life studies that indicate that a different date would be more appropriate, or if in some cases a manufacturer will say, I don't want my consumers using this thing beyond 12 or 18 months because it may deteriorate. They know more about the product than we do, but so I don't think anybody will ever question a choice to give an earlier best by date. But if in the absence of some color, best by date should be 2 years, adjustable for context, obviously.
Gabe, can you talk a little bit about how just for my own edification, and maybe we've talked about this and it's not coming to mind right now, but how the logic of landing on 2 years, like why 2?
I can ask Mike and Andy. I mean, it's sort of a rule of reason. I think, we're looking at an enormous range of products and they're not the same. They don't have the same physical characteristics, packaging. I think so. I think it was felt by the PR folks, and they did this a little bit by looking at what other states do and what other states' presumptions are, that 2 years is a good marker. I think I'd be pretending that there were any kind of deep science to this when we're talking about a range of products as diverse as, all of the cannabis products in the market. But 2 years makes a good default. If a manufacturer has reason to want to assign a shorter one, by all means, they know more about when the product, they wouldn't want to stand by the product anymore. And I think what the team is saying is if you're going to assign a product more than 2 years, you owe a little bit of an explanation because 2 years is a pretty far out space. And it's not a trivial issue. We know, in terms of product safety discussions among state regulators, leaching and concern about what happens when some products age, especially products where there's contact between metal and distillate, is a live issue. The science is unsettled. The quality of the products varies. You can buy a ceramic coated element in some and have some protection there. A lot of other products don't have that. There's just a lot we don't know. So they're, as with PR, I think they're just sort of rules of reason about when it's appropriate to warn people either something's getting a bit old or to check back in the case of PR.
And so just if there is, I know that there's lots of research happening around this. None of it is complete. So if we were to get research, either through CANRA or through some other sort of entity that is known for this, and it was different than 2 years, let's say it's less than 2 years, this is amendable, right? We wouldn't be tied to this necessarily. If we were to suddenly find out tomorrow that, a particular product is really only safe for a year, for example, or a year and a half or something like that. Is that right?
It is. The way you tackle that, I think, depends a little bit on the urgency of whatever it is it's discovered. It's, on one hand, it's sort of, we really can't trust it. On the other, there's lead or mercury in the distillate right now. That's a recall. But, on the gentle end of things where there's just reason to be skeptical and to assign a shorter number, that can certainly be done. So really, they're just giving a default in order to have a default, but whether it's scientific evidence or manufacturer information, can appropriately adjust that as long as there's a coherent reason.
Okay, thank you. As with all of this, the things emerge, right? And so that's helpful. I appreciate that.
Yes, and we always, and really, on the far end, we always have emergency rulemaking if there's really a reason to be concerned about public health and safety, and if there's an adulteration, the board can act right away and when we can stop sale. But hard to know what's coming, but I know that's the subject of a lot of regulatory attention. That's why you see people trying to elbow a little bit of room into their dating systems. Here we have a continuation of what I was talking about before, the effort to kind of distinguish what had been conflated about the dates applicable to flower and pre-rolls. That means harvested on and packed on dates. They still mean the same things as ever, but then the manufactured on date applies to products. And again, the guidance was just a little bit confusing and kind of merging those in a way that wasn't helpful. And so you've got them pulled separately here.
Harvested on date. I'm trying to think about flour that's been flash frozen. Harvested date would still be the date that it was frozen. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And I think sophisticated consumers will understand that the kind of mental math you do after the harvest date depends a little bit on the conditions of storage and means of production after. But that's accurate. I think as soon as it's removed from the ground, that's sort of the harvest, or pulled off the plant in the case of trimming. Okay. Again, here, this is just cleanup of some messy writing. We had 2 bullets about beverages, and it was realized that it would make a lot more sense to make them 1 bullet about beverages. And so that's what you've got there, no rules changing. Or, I might have overshot the demarcation bit. I'm sorry about that. Can we roll back to that real fast? There was... there is this, and I misled you a little bit when I said there's nothing new. I think they would like to see beverage containers marked with a serving demarcation. The sense is that's more accurate to the to the law and the rule applicable to servings. Obviously, everybody knows you can't, you know, cut a line in a liquid. And so having some marker on the outside to help the consumer measure or know when I'm at half, it is thought to be helpful. And I think that shouldn't require significant changes from anybody, but they'll ease people into that. It was the strikeout of the Big Five. People just didn't like it. They thought it was a little too chummy and inside baseball, and nobody knows what the Big Five are. So that's all. That was just a stylistic bit. So here we come to the interesting stuff, which are this appendix is not even new, but the one below it is that talks about marketing terms, and the testing matrix is not new. Here's the new stuff. So the goal really has been from the PR team with this, which is sort of a glossary of common and accepted terms or standard and accepted terms, is to move everybody toward describing products in ways that are accurate and transparent about the production method that got you the product. You know, so if something is a resin, it shouldn't be labeled as a rosin. That would mislead people as to how it was produced, things like that. You know, if a product is labeled solventless or using a term that would indicate it's solventless, solvents should not have been used in its production. These kind of things really aren't very not very contentious. Most people are labeling their things accurately, but because it's a very new industry without a lot of standardization as to the use of some of these terms, I think the PR folks feel that it would be helpful in terms of transparency to the consumer and consistency in what products are called to lay out guidance, sort of a guidance glossary that explains what the presumptive meaning of the various words might be. I can let Alex and Andy speak to the details of it, but for those in the industry, this wouldn't be much of a surprise, you know, talking about, you know, just transparency about extraction methods, production methods. So if you say something, you know, CO2, ethanol, solvents, how to talk about broad spectrum versus full spectrum versus isolate, the distillate hash, bubble hash, distillate hash. So all of these terms, you know, have a meaning to most sophisticated cannabis entrepreneurs and consumers. And so the effort is just to kind of have a common language and make sure that it's understood. I don't imagine, you know, most of these are pretty straightforward. I didn't see any that would really be controversial with anybody in my, you know, from my point of view. But if there are any concerns, or if you're reading them thinking, no, that doesn't really match what my understanding of that product is, this would be a good time to talk about it. But I think they're pretty straightforward. Here, the PR folks have given you a really detailed description of, you know, the various names for concentrate that are accepted in the industry do map to very certain product types. You know, this should describe the consistency of the product, what it looks like, and how it was made. So there's what you've got. And again, I think a few of us think these are very contestable. It's more that you know, helpful reference that gives a common language to people in the industry versus people who may be new to it, or consumers who are reading these names and these labels and wondering what precisely they mean. I don't, you know, if you took the average person walking into a dispensary and said, well, describe terp sauce to me, they're probably not going to be able to give you a very consistent definition. So here it is. And I think that's it from top to bottom. I owe a lot of thanks to the PR folks who put in some time, you know, just basically asking themselves, what kind of questions can we answer for people to make this process simpler? And it has so far been really, I think, successful in terms of consistency with PR offerings. And so we appreciate the industry folks who are on the input side of this as well. It seems to be smoothing out nicely.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's a, you know, just sign of I think moving in the right direction, standardization, consistency. I'm curious, has any of this document or these red lines, blue lines been published at all before today?
Not unless somebody asked for them. No, this is the first they're being presented. This is not among the guidances that has a mandatory holding period of 90 days or anything like that.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
at the same time, I think, common sense would say the PR team is not going to snap at you if you don't have a demarcation line on your can in the next 2 weeks or something. It's just time to move toward that.
Are there really?
I was just gonna say, from a label, if there are labeling concerns like the demarcation as an example, I'm sure our team will work with folks to make sure you've exhausted your current packaging before you recan or put your next line in.
Mike, at the top of your head, where do you see potential concerns arising, if any?
None major. I mean, the demarcation line has basically been a consistent ask from the PR team regardless. So most beverages already have that on there. So this just clarifies that. We might get some questions about the manufactured on date versus the harvest on date. That's been a slight point of contention in the past, but nothing that hasn't risen to any extreme levels. It's something we could easily work with folks. I think in general, we're pretty flexible regarding labels as far as giving folks time to adjust. The other one that might take some time for adjustment is the process lot matching. Coming from our system, I think has been a consistent practice in the past. Most cultivators have their own way of identifying their process lots, and lots of times they would put that on their label. We're asking them now to make sure that it matches what is coming out of the inventory tracking system. That could take some adjustment. And again, we wouldn't have the expectation that in a week all labels have been changed. We'll work with folks to make sure that everything is up to snuff.
Julie, did you have a comment?
Olga asked my question, so that's fine. That was exactly the question I was going to ask.
My question is, this is absolutely the direction we need to move in. I'm wondering, is there anything about these changes that are timely? I mean, what I generally like to do, anything that requires changes to a label, considering people have printed tens of thousands of these, that we give people some amount of comment period.
Yeah, I don't know if there are many real substantive label changes. I would defer to Andy just for clarification. Andy, what's your take on that? As far as my thinking goes, though, I would be fine giving folks time to adjust.
On timeline for implementation or for feedback. I think either are fine, and I think we can be pretty flexible. None of these are like earth shattering, I don't believe. There's some like the alignment with the process lots. That's just for consistency. We already have licensees that are compliant with that. So it's just getting some folks that need to make those changes. The naming convention suggestions, people are already doing similar, things with their naming, and I think it's just to add consistency within the market. So I think it'll help long term with moving these products through the review process quicker, and improving our process.
Is it a comment that you're looking for, Pepper, or just an indication of like a run out period, so that, because I feel like guidance is usually an interpretation of the rules that we've already made, or a lot of this seems like conversations we've already decided on. So I don't know if we want to ask for,
I'm not sure if my opinion has been asked here, but I think that we have a really good solution from the past, which is just the spend through provision. Almost every time one of these calls for something that might be a little bit different, where somebody already invested in labels, conventionally, unless there's a public safety reason not to, the team has always let people spend through, just with the instruction that they'd prefer that they print them in conformity with the new guidance going forward.
I see that I think that these are I think that they're somewhat innocuous internal changes that we've already discussed publicly and voted on, but I just feel like some people may not agree with that. There's a whole new section of definitions, that people may feel differently than where we came down. So, my preference would be to vote on now that people have seen these changes, this will be, I think, the draft would be posted to our website, give people 30 days to give comments and,
the next board meeting.
and then just approve it at the next board meeting. That's my preference, but
Any thoughts, Julie?
Well, I'm trying to remember. I know we've discussed process for guidance, and it's not, but we haven't really like codified it. And I just want to make sure that whatever we're doing, that we're consistent. Because if we're not consistent, then it's just confusing for everyone. And I can't like pull up my notes from that conversation right now, so I don't know. But I don't have a I'm not opposed to what you're saying, Pepper. I just want to make sure that we're clear and consistent so that both the industry and the staff and, and the, all the viewers at home know what we're doing.
Well, I mean, I agree that there are certainly aspects of this which are literally just taking things that are two lines and combining them into one, or vice versa, like things that are just purely administrative, like Scribner's kind of issues. But I can see how some people might think some of this stuff is substantive. So, I mean, when we have substantive changes to guidance, just having what's happened in the past not happening again, I feel like just giving people an opportunity to comment. I mean, if there's parts of this that need to happen immediately, then maybe we can focus on those. Otherwise, if 30 days, I mean, I don't see much changing within 30 days.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, nothing needs to happen immediately. These are all just items that could improve our process and the process on a whole. So
yeah, and I think that this is absolutely the direction we need to move into.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just kind of, creating more standardization is the key for a regulatory body. But I would like to just get a little bit of opportunity for comment if possible.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to be overruled by that on that issue. I don't mind.
I'm comfortable with providing 30 days or until the next board meeting to hearing, feedback that things should be adjusted.
Okay. Yeah. Like I said, I'm not opposed. I just want to make sure that we have a consistent process.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the product equivalency was the last time this came up, and we did have a 30-day delay on that, maybe even longer on that. That's the last one I can think of.
Motion.
Okay, sure.
I move that the board approve the proposed amendments to the product registration guidance, but defer enforcement till immediately following our next regular meeting in order for anyone objecting to the new content may comment.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Okay, thank you for that. This is a lot of really important work. I want to make sure I'm underscoring that, but I just want, potentially impacted parties to have an opportunity. All right. Retail siting, Julie.
Okay. Let's see. This went well in dress rehearsal. Let's see if it works now. Can you see my slides?
It looks like they're about to pop up any second now. Haven't popped up yet, though. Oh,
it's loading.
We're going to scroll in.
There
Yes.
you go.
Okay. And is it the slides and my notes, or is it just the slides?
I only see your slides.
Great. Okay. That's great. That worked out better than I thought. So the goal of this sort of section of the agenda is really to share out with the board the work that I've been doing with sort of a small work group to get just a baseline of information and understanding of some of the issues around retail siting, and just kind of coalesce all the information together, at least that I could get at the time, and share it out. So I just want to be sure to be clear that this is not this is not the end of the conversation around retail siting. It's the beginning, like Pepper talked about before, doing a work group. This information is sort of meant to let that work group start with a basis of knowledge, I guess is the best way to put it. So that's the table setting for sort of this part of the agenda. And really the goal is for us as a board to have a next steps conversation. So if between now and the time that the work group begins meeting, there's other information that needs to be gathered, now is a good time to do that. So just to give a little background for folks as a refresher, we all remember that Act 164 in 2020 created the Cannabis Control Board and allowed us to adopt the initial rules, but did not allow us the ability to set geographic location for retail. And we grew exponentially from 3 to where we are now over this period of time. And we closed retail, as we all remember, in 2024. We then got the authority to put a rule in place. We started that process. It was not, some of the initial ideas were sort of rejected by the different public comments. And so we put a much broader rule in place. We've been talking about the different things over time that we would look at when it comes to retail siting. And in that, that's sort of where the need for a work group and sort of some information gathering happen. So I engaged in what is called an appreciative inquiry process. And really that process is meant to gather a small group of people together for a conversation. And that conversation is meant to kind of identify what's working the best so that you can move forward from that place. And that is what I did. And that's kind of the information that I'll share in terms of what that group talked about. So I did this in a couple different ways. One is I talked one-on-one with different folks, retailers, public health folks, municipal government folks. I did reach out to some cultivators. I wasn't able to connect with them at the time, but there will be opportunities going forward to have those voices heard as well. So I did a round of one-on-one meetings and then did a kind of a roundtable conversation with all of those folks just to sort of get all of the ideas down on paper for some thought leadership. In that time, we also had a handful of board presentations, and I've included the links in this PowerPoint for folks if they want to go back and watch those around public health, around municipal zoning and things like that. So we had those conversations at the board level. And then we've asked our staff to collect some data around the geographic location of retail. So I'll go through some of that now. Here's the link. So when this is posted, you'll be able to go right to the timestamp for those conversations. In the work group process, the more we talked, the more some key principles started to identify themselves, right? And really like 4 of them really came to the surface that made sense to share with you all as sort of like a basis. And a work group would want to look at this and decide if this is the key principles if they want to work from or if they think they need to be amended. And I can't see you all anymore. So if you have something you want to jump in with, just start talking. So the key principles that were identified, and this probably makes a lot of sense for folks who've been watching this issue for some time, is, market factors, that market data should really influence the numbers of retailers and where they are, including supply and demand, public health factors, and the monitoring that happens. Looking at that data should guide some of the policy decisions. Local governance factors, we talk all the time about, the role of municipalities and what guardrails they need to be able to have some statewide guardrails and know what they can do within their own towns. And then probably very important to the CCB is being able to not having more than we can regulate, right? In order to regulate a safe, fair, and equitable marketplace, we have to be able to do that with the resources we have. So these are sort of the key points that this group of folks I spoke to came up with as the key principles for thinking about retail siting when it gets to the point, like these are the things you'd be thinking about in the back of your mind when it comes time to write a rule and when the work group starts speaking in earnest. And I've added that, all this is happening in what is a continuously shifting landscape, right? We also, in that time, did market analysis, and retail access was part of that market analysis. I've identified what I think are the key points from that market analysis for this discussion. We know that we've got almost 70% of the folks in that market analysis reported that they're purchasing from adult use retail locations, but we also got some really good information about why people don't when they don't. And so that's something we want to be thinking about as well. In our last meeting, Olga gave us a nice rundown. Thanks to folks for pulling this data together about what the licensing businesses look like for retail. So who's got just retail, how many have multiple licenses, how this market is shaping up is something we're probably going to want to be thinking about. And then a special thanks for all the data requests I give to our staff, but this one especially because Liz did some mapping for us, which I think is really helpful in understanding where these retail locations are. So this is a map of where our retail locations are with a 5-mile driving radius. And, this is not to say that this is what we would look at for a rule necessarily, but just to give people a sense of where things are. When we think about density, one thing I noticed with this map in particular is that they are sort of, the density is happening around like our major roadways, which is also in Vermont where most of our commerce happens, right? That's where most of our retail in general is. So I thought that was really interesting about this particular map. She also did for me one that's a 15-mile driving radius. So you can see that it gets, a little bit, a little more overlap between retailers. I do note that this one and the next one, which is the 30-mile driving radius, goes up into the Canadian border. And we know that the limits of the cannabis market do stop at that border. That's not necessarily to indicate that there is a reach into Canada for our marketplace. And then here's all three of them together, just kind of to be able to compare what the potential reach is when you think about density, when we're thinking about where things are sited and how they're sited along, where our major roadways are and where our commerce is, and so on and so forth. So this is the data I thought would be the most helpful to the board and a work group, and that the work group was so very helpful at collecting. I also wrote up a summary that's got all of the links for all of the research that was provided by the work group, which was very, very helpful. And we can post that. So when folks start working on something a little bit more tangible, here's the research that I thought you might want to have to start doing that work. So again, the next steps question is really what, I ran through the slides quickly so that we could spend the bulk of the time on the next steps question is, what is it that the board feels like it needs to be able to continue this conversation and, sort of move to the next work group step or whatever it is between now and the time that the work group begins so that we can start kind of moving towards some conclusion for these projects.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, Julie, thank you for that. That driving radius, so the like those maps, that wasn't just a 15-mile or 30-mile or 5-mile concentric circle. That was like if you follow the roads.
Yes.
That's the crow flies.
Yep, that's what I gather. Yep, that's what I believe Liz did for us.
Well, I've sent Olga a list of data points that I think might be relevant to this conversation already.
Okay.
But I do think that having a work group on this makes a lot of sense. Just a form, like, again, I don't know how these work groups are going to look just because, I've already proposed, I think 4 or 5 of them at this point. I don't know how we're going to divide them up and, have information sharing between the board members or if we're all just going to sit through all of them. But I do think bringing in some additional voices and having maybe a target date to kind of have a work product would be helpful.
Yeah, I think in this one in particular, a target date, because we're you know, a lot of what the market is choosing to do in the direction how they're making business decisions is probably waiting on this rule because it has a real big impact.
Yeah, I'm excited to get this one rolling sooner than later. And maybe to hear from some audiences that you weren't able to hear from, Julie, on the first kind of go around. And it's a tough issue because, you know, I think at the town level, I think there's a healthy competition arguments that I support where I don't want to see one option in one town. I think healthy competition, two options for consumers is a good thing. And, you know, I'd be willing to bet that in most towns, you know, if we're focusing strictly on driving ranges, especially as someone like myself who has to drive far to get groceries, I'm sure I could find an illicit market grower to supply me what I need closer than the grocery store, you know? So how do we account for that kind of data that's really hard to encapsulate? I might need to drive to a Shaw's or something 20 miles away, but that doesn't mean that I'm doing something not in those areas of retail along roadways that you're referencing. Every single time I go and look for cannabis that's not in the legal system. So how do we kind of figure all of that out, you know?
Yeah, it's notable that in the market analysis, both, I mean, price, of course, right? And convenience, of course, but also the third item was really about loyalty. And that changing that is really about changing consumer behavior. It's not, you know, that's about demonstrating that the purchasing in this market, it has more value, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So I think adding this to that other list of potential working groups. So if people do want to participate in a retail siting working group, if you want to just at least get some interest, you know, let your interest be known to the board. I think just ccb.info@vermont.gov, you know, with something in the subject line, retail siting working group or work group, and then contact information in the body of the email would be helpful. And in, you know, in between now and our next meeting, we'll figure out how we're going to start structuring these things so that we can, you know, work towards conclusions on these, you know, very timely issues.
Yeah, and inform proposed rules.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think the event pilot program, it started out as how do we pilot direct consumer sales? So I think, you know, how that rolls out will help inform this decision as well. Yeah. So, you know, how it goes, we'll see. Thanks for the work on that, and thanks for presenting it to us.
Yeah, and many thanks to the people who were willing to chat with me. I tried to hear from folks that we don't often hear from, and those that made for some really rich conversations.
Yeah. All right, lab security policy. Is this you, Mike?
I'm on the agenda. So I can roll through it if you'd like me to. I'll just give me 1 sec to get it up here.
I'm not, you know, I'm just going to frame things up. I don't see anything that you propose here that is any different than just an explanation of what's in our current rules.
Yeah.
And I think we can frame it, and maybe Gabe can frame it why this is even in front of the board. Because I think, again, we're not changing a rule here.
Right.
No, exactly. Yeah, so essentially, we just want to ensure that the labs are covered by a security policy that's written, you know, like the policy documents. Our rule 2.2.22 basically allows us to create security policies for license types. So we really just want to make sure that the labs are covered, make sure that they're aligned with each other, and make sure that they're aligned with the security requirements that we require for all licensees. So it's really basic, basically covers ensuring video surveillance for the labs, and some requirements about video surveillance, being able to access that data for a certain period of time, making sure that there are alarms in the right places, that they're locking doors, really basic stuff. One thing that we've also talked about is just increasing our level of awareness for inventory tracking related to labs. This is specific to non-compliance samples. Labs occasionally will take donation samples from licensees for research purposes. We just want to make sure we have the right inventory tracking in place when that happens. I don't believe it happens very much, but when it does, we just need a formal policy.
Sure.
So, and none of this is really new. It's just
putting it all on one page.
Yeah.
Great.
That's
Yeah.
the way it seems to me.
Yeah, I don't see anything. It's not just a kind of direct reference to our rule or an explanation. And then, yeah, okay.
And the labs are familiar, right? You've had
Oh, yeah.
discussions with.
Yeah, I had discussions with the labs. They seem to be on board. There are a couple questions about inventory tracking. That was really it. They had no general concerns about implementation.
I have a question because I wasn't quite sure what something meant. Where it's the presumption of association, where do I understand that somebody who, because it says something like an individual an individual associated with a cannabis establishment cannot test their, does it mean that, well, first of all, why don't I find the part so that I'm making some sense? What's
I can
Do you know
give
what I'm
some
talking about,
background
Dave?
on that one because
Okay.
it's probably the one that bears the most discussion because it's
Yeah.
sort of the most novel issue. It emerged that some folks are aware of the mandatory reporting requirement, and that requirement gets a lot done in terms of horsepower for public health and safety, because if the lab becomes aware of an adulterated product or a product with concerns, it reports to us by rule. Our rule says regardless of fault or cause. We don't care who's at fault. We don't care that somebody did something wrong or didn't do it wrong. What we care about is that the product is adulterated, period. We'll figure out the rest later, but the board wants to know about it. The presumption of association written into this section is meant to end what really looks like misconduct, where folks would, I think there was a phenomenon of folks who were concerned that their products may be adulterated, but wanted to evade the reporting of an unfavorable result by saying, I'm here with my home grow. This is my, yes, of course, me from the licensed cannabis establishment I have, but I'm here with my home grow and I want you to test these 6 or 7 samples. But don't worry, if something's wrong with them, you don't need to tell anybody. And that's not going to work. So that's just about it. I think most people understand that there's a kind of duty of good faith in submitting these things, but I think there was a little bit of creativity, in hopes of evading mandatory reporting, or if there was a suspicious lot where you wanted to kind of find out first and let everybody else know later, you would do this sort of thing. At this point in the maturity of the market, the acts of somebody who is a licensee or an ID card holder, or at least a principal or controller ID card holder related to cannabis, just have to be presumed to be those of their business, not of the kind of personal growth thing. So that's what we've got. That's the reason for that. I hope I've explained it clear. I hope I haven't made it more confusing, but that's why you see that.
But if it doesn't prevent someone from testing their personal grow if they are an ID card holder, right? We don't want to deter people from testing their home grow if they want to, or to leave the regulated market. You know what I mean?
Well, if somebody holds an ID card and they come in with a sample, no matter where it came from, and that sample turns up problems, that should be the subject of a mandatory report, just like any other. We can sort the rest out later, but it just should be presumptively imputed to the establishment the person is associated with. And again, that doesn't mean nobody could ever test their own personal stuff and get something hot, but it's just so unlikely, and the other side of it is so mischievous that it's better just to say, the mandatory, when in doubt, report in a mandatory sense, even if the person submitting the sample professes that the sample is not part of the establishment the person's associated with.
Okay, because at the end of the day, what we really want to make sure is that it's not, if all that's sorted out and it's just that person's individual grow, what we care about is that it's not going into the stream of commerce, right?
Yes, yeah. So, it doesn't mean somebody's done something wrong, but just as your rule says, we don't care about cause or fault. At the point of mandatory reporting, we don't care about whether you say it's from your personal grow. We'll figure that out later. The important thing is that the board get the information, I think, is the effort here.
Okay.
Other questions from Mike, Gabe, Olga, anyone else?
Nope.
Is there a motion to approve this?
I move that the board approve the laboratory safety policy as proposed.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next is Delta 8 and Delta 10 adulteration thresholds. Mike, did you want to cue this up, or Gabe?
I'm happy to cue this one up. So basically, the compliance team is asking for the board to set some thresholds for essentially trivial amounts of both Delta 8 and Delta 10 in cannabis products. So we basically have a rule already that says no isomers of Delta 9 variants are allowed. That being said, there are small amounts of naturally occurring Delta 8 and Delta 10 that can occur in products. So internally, the product registration team had a threshold that we were working with. And over the past year or so, we started noticing some products with elevated levels above that threshold. And there was some confusion in the industry. Folks wanted to know where our line was and what we were going off of. So this attempts to clear up that confusion essentially and establish a firm line, which the compliance team is asking for is under 3%. So we would go up to 2.99 essentially, and anything over that we'd consider adulterated. So that's the gist of it. We consulted with labs and we got some data, and basically across 7,200 products, the average Delta 10 percentage is less than 3%. Delta 8 was a lot smaller than that. It came in maybe 1%.
So just for my own information, if something spikes above whatever the internal threshold is, whether it's 3% or whatever else we've been talking about, is it your opinion, perspective that within the manufacturing process, I hate to say naturally occurring because it is a manufacturing process, but typically these spikes happen because of lackluster SOPs or messy operating procedures, or something went wrong in the manufacturing process that produced this elevated spike of this isomer.
Yes.
Not necessarily the level occurring in the product.
Yeah, it's our belief that anything above that would generally happen either from intentionally isomerizing CBD or a manufacturing mishap. There's something that can happen specific to Delta 10, which is why we've started seeing these elevated levels. Essentially, when acid is introduced in the extraction process, particularly in CO2 extraction, this happens like when the extract or input material is too wet or moist, you'll get an excess buildup of carbonic acid, which can lead to isomerization. And generally, that process isn't enough alone to create any significant levels of Delta 10. But in very specific manufacturing practices, specifically short path distillation, there's longer time for the extract to be exposed to that acidic environment. And so it's potential that, anything over that threshold would be a manufacturing mistake, basically.
Yeah. You said it more eloquently than I phrased the question, so thank you.
So manufacturing mishap at the manufacturing level. What process governs how the cultivator who cultivated the weed that sent it out for extraction, that has the the manufacturer screw up? Like, is there any way to hold that person harmless, or is that just a business transaction issue, contracts issue between those two entities?
It's mostly a contracts business issue, that we've had to hold the line. So most of the time, like over the past year, the folks that have been impacted by some of these elevated levels are cultivators or other manufacturers who just source from other licensees, and they're kind of left with these products that have elevated levels of Delta 10. And we received 4 waivers throughout the year asking to sell these products, and we denied 3 of them. And we basically said there's no violation on your behalf, and we made sure we did our investigation into their practices. But at the end of the day, there wasn't much recourse besides them, negotiating their contracts.
And just jumping back to one of the earlier things that you said, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. We really don't, we voted, we have a rule that we don't allow any Delta 8 or Delta 10 in these products. The reason for the 3% or the 5% internal rule is because of this is a byproduct of, but it should never really cross the 3% unless there's a state consent.
Exactly. Yeah. And we would consider anything above that adulterated. I've looked at a lot of different states. Almost every other state either doesn't speak to any action level, or they expressly say that any detection of Delta 10 or Delta 8 in a licensed cannabis product is adulteration. So, yeah, they don't have this, we have eyes on every product because product registration. So, yeah, lots of programs don't have that same benefit.
So I don't really see this, unlike the, potentially unlike the first guidance document that we looked at, where there may be arguably substantive changes. I don't really see that here because our threshold really was 0.
Yeah.
Just out of a practicality, you guys had an internal decision to allow some amount, just so that you wouldn't have to have fights over this exact problem. But this really is, we have said as a board, there should be virtually 0% Delta 8 or Delta 10 in these products.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing we really want to limit is the inversion of hemp distillates into the marketplace. And that's one of our major concerns as well. So this attempts to do that.
All right.
Great.
Well, I'm okay with this. I think it's actually more flexible than this standard that we adopted into rule. So I don't really see this as one of those issues that needs to be noticed and get comment on, because it is, a loosening of our strict 0 tolerance policy.
Great.
Does anyone feel differently?
Nope.
No.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion on this?
Yes, there is. I move that the board endorse the tolerance thresholds applied by the PR team when determining when a product is adulterated by novel THC isomers.
Second.
On favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
This next one I'm happy to be part of, or I can jump back there.
Sure. So the next one is around tier relegation thresholds. I think just by way of context, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, the legislature, when they were considering a moratorium, and we said, no, don't do that for cultivation. We said, what we really want to do is allow to stop issuing new cultivation, but allow successful smaller businesses to graduate into higher tiers. And on the flip side, let have relegate larger cultivators that are only using a fraction of their allowable canopy to renew at tiers that are more reflective of their actual production, not what they theoretically have capacity for. We wrote a rule around this, but I think my understanding is that the licensing team would like some guidance as to how and when to start implementing that rule.
Yeah, what information should be considered?
Yeah.
What the board is interested in before we engage licensees who fall into the bucket of maybe using less than they have been licensed.
So when we requested this authorization, we did so because a number of other states have this. I thought this would be a good lever for us to have at our disposal, the graduation and the relegation. We not a lot of states use the relegation because sometimes it may create perverse incentives amongst the cultivators to overproduce or spread out in ways that are inefficient. And we've already done some tier expansions, but I did notice when I was looking into this that Massachusetts, just as of I think December of last year, kind of put out a bulletin that they're going to start using their tier relegation, and they stopped issuing new cultivation licenses too. And they have a number of factors that they look at renewal. They haven't done it yet. They haven't taken any action, and I would like to see how their experience with this goes, considering they're about 6 months ahead of us. But I can tell you what they look at, which might be helpful. So they look at cultivation and production history for the 6 months for indoor and the past harvest cycle for outdoor. They look at the transfer sales and excise tax payment history. They look at existing inventory and inventory history, sales contracts, and then just to catch all any other factors relevant to ensuring responsible cultivation, production, and inventory management. So it seems like if we have a list of people that are drastically underutilizing their canopy, maybe there's an inquiry that happens at the time of renewal around those 5 factors.
I think that makes sense. Some interrogatories, for lack of a better way to describe it, some questions if you're below a certain threshold as to tell us why.
Right.
Do we have to determine the threshold though? Is that, we have to, yeah.
It would be helpful.
It's in our rule.
Yeah.
Right?
I guess if what it is, I guess it's below the max of the next tier down.
Right.
Is that what we want to use?
Okay.
Yeah, we could go with that.
When I was looking into this, doing a little research like you were, Pepper, I looked back at our original S&D model, and that was based on a 70% usage of the cultivation tier.
Okay.
That was based on 70% usage of the canopy. Sorry, that's what I meant to say.
Yeah, I don't know how Massachusetts calculates canopy. Ours is a little bit different, I feel like, because maybe it's not. I feel like we, in our canopy calculation for indoor, at least, we say the whole grow room, including aisles and,
Yeah, we've actually said it's essentially the plant canopy.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what was going on.
But I think we have a process, so I think we have a very clear understanding of every tier 3, 4, and 5 cultivators usage rate based on the very recent data. So I think if we are going with the max capacity of the tier below, I think that gives us enough guidance to flag establishments that fall into that bucket at renewal and ask some questions about that.
Yeah.
That could be good. And then depending on the answers, we could bring them to the board, I assume, for sort of consideration and get the guidance from the board whether or not the answers trigger relegation process.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. I think generally speaking, it might be nice if the team can try and pull together some like market share data of tiers 3, 4, and 5. I mean, there's some that are operating. What, you know, in addition to the spirit of the conversation we heard in public comment, just, you know, how what's the impact of their shelf life at the point of retail sale comparative to how much of their canopy they're actually currently utilizing. I don't know. Some of that kind of broad market information might help us understand who's holding on to canopy for a future date and who's just doing so more intentionally for less mischievous reasons. Yeah.
Well, like market share and inventory turnover, right? Like how fast are you moving your inventory out of storage to another part of the supply chain?
I don't know how hard that is for the team to pull off, but it would be, you know, great if we could.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I always like to say is we're not going to relegate a tier 1 out of existence. Sure. So, you know, just want to make sure that's said, you know. And also, if someone had a bad harvest in an outdoor cultivator because of frost or snow or, you know, I think that's part of that catch-all. Take that into consideration. Not, you know, what. You know.
I certainly view the outdoor conundrum differently than repeated runs from an indoor cultivator who continue to use a certain percentage of their canopy over time. When they have grow rooms that are licensed with us that are sitting, not being used, that might be an intentional business decision. Right. Because they're not doing well. I don't know, but you know, what are your reasons? I think we would like to see that. I'd like to know your reasons before we move on anything. Yeah, you know. Yeah,
definitely. Okay.
Yep.
Is that good?
That's good. Yes, I think we'll make sure we account for the kind of questions. We'll see if we need to bring them to you, or if we'll just we have enough from this meeting. Okay. But yes, I think that makes sense.
Thanks, Mike. Late renewal submissions and criteria for acceptance. You know, we've talked about this quite a bit. Like when is kind of, you know, enough with all these late renewals when they happen consistently over every renewal period. And I do think that we owe it to the people that are doing consistently coming in on time to have an articulated policy here, so that we can be consistent. Is there any more to the conversation that you want us to touch on? I mean, I think we've talked about in the past, 3 times in a row, or 3 times over the course of 5 years, maybe.
I'm fine with 3 times in a row. I think most people are, as you mentioned, are pretty efficient when it comes to getting their license in on time. I think we might need to hone in on the late incomplete versus late and incomplete, which I know ruffles our staff and leaves us kind of chasing people down. So I don't know if we need to kind of differentiate between those 2 things, but those are my thoughts right now.
I think this is for the board really to decide. I think in terms of our staff, we will continue to bring those licenses with all of their history to you. I think it's the industry that needs to know.
3 strikes and you're out.
Yes, and sort of be aware that their application for renewal may not be granted because the board has made it clear that there is a line at some point somewhere. And if you're saying that the 3rd one in a row is likely something that you will consider for.
We're approaching that, I think, next year, right? Really is where we're going to start seeing the 3 strikes.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should decide whether or not this goes, if we start it today, or if there's some retroactive, like, have we put people on notice enough to go back and say this is the 3rd time, or do we have to go forward? And then I think I'm good with 3 strikes, but for like all the things you talked about before, Pepper, when we were talking about the tier relegation, natural disaster, a death of an owner, those types of things. But the other question I think that comes up is, does this impact, like if you have someone who's a multiple license owner, and they're only ever late on their cultivation license, does that impact their other licenses if those licenses are already always on time? Like what is it business groups? Is it individual licenses? What is the limit that we can enforce that? And I sense that Gabe has something to say.
Thank you. I guess I would just emphasize that I think you can be, you have the rule and you're really just setting a presumption here. Anytime somebody's late and doesn't have a good reason, you can reject it. Anytime somebody's late and does have a good reason and hasn't blown the deadline, you can accept it. You're just really trying to set a rule of reason that tells people what to expect. To me, it would make a lot of sense for the board to say something like, any principal or controller cardholder who is involved in 3 sequential late renewals can presume that the third one is going to be refused. And then that's another way of answering your question, that it would probably make sense to deal with ownership groups rather than individual licenses. But basically somebody who's involved in a license who's late the third time in sequence should expect that it wouldn't be accepted. That would be a pretty good presumption, and it would preserve, because it's a presumption, all of the edge cases, ability to exercise your discretion in edge cases where there's a good reason either to reject one that would qualify or to accept one that wouldn't. But that's all I have to say about it. I just putting in my pitch for ownership groups.
Because I have a question about that. So if it's an ownership group and there are mainly the same owners across the various licenses, but 1 or 2 that are different, do we run into an issue if we say can that only apply to ownership groups where it's all of the same owners across licenses, or is there something that we have to do if there's the cultivation license just has like 1 different owner than the other 2 licenses?
Somehow I feel like it's fair to say that the common denominator in all these late applications is that guy. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay.
As far as the retroactive component, I feel like we've been talking about this ad nauseum for like 2 or 3 years. Like, I don't think I have a problem with applying this to previous late submissions.
Yeah, that's fine. All right.
In terms of a vibe check, I should say how much better this is than it used to be. This was a real problem. We used to have pages of late renewals. Industry's been awesome about it. Staff put in a lot of work to get things awesome, but it really is it's not nearly the problem it used to be. So I think some appreciations to all the people that worked on that.
And we've rolled back a lot of what has to be provided at renewal, right? Like they don't have to, at first, that first year was like you had to apply for a license all over again. A lot of that has sort of fallen away to just what we really need for renewal, or it's easier to sort of upload the same documents or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think both sides worked on it. You guys did a tremendous amount to make the application process smoother and more predictable. And I think industry folks got serious about starting with time to finish. So all good.
Okay. So I think we're good on retroactivity, and I think we're good on ownership groups. And we're good on 3 strikes as a presumptive, we're not going to accept.
Yep. We're not going to renew.
Yeah.
How does this get communicated out?
By people watching you right now, I guess you could. I mean, you could choose to put something in your, in a bulletin or something if you wanted to. It's more, I think, important to me. I don't want to tell you guys what you need to broadcast, but the most important thing is that you have a common idea yourself of what you want brought to you, and how you want to act consistently in the future. Do we need a PSA about it? Probably not, but up to you in terms of what the public statement should be about it. Most people, I think, get it, that they're pushing it by the time they're repeating.
I mean, I don't think we need a press release, but I think if it could go in the regular like update email of the things that the board has decided, that would be helpful, just to make sure that it's communicated out.
Okay.
Yeah, and we can probably include it
In
through
email communication.
through our licensing team when we issue licenses for folks who are late, to kind of say, hey, you've already had 2 late submissions. Please note that the board might be less likely to consider you for renewal if you're late again, based on the discussion during board meeting on the 24th.
We do an 120 day, like that's our first touch. Yeah, maybe in that, maybe in that email, there's just a note that says, by the way, third, third late in a row on any of your licenses is presumptively not going to be approved.
I think it's also important to point out that a lot of people are going to be due for their background check renewal next year, or starting soon.
Yeah.
So that could cause a lot of people who already have 2 strikes to be late again if they don't get on top of it in a timely way.
Yeah.
So they should start early.
Yeah.
Whatever announcements, public service announcements that we've done on this through our licensing team, thank you, already has been working. So I think they've got a process to make sure that this new thing gets communicated out.
Yeah.
Do we need a motion on this, or do we vote already?
I don't think
we
that's
voted on this.
No. Okay.
And if you'd like to document it that way, I think there's nothing wrong with it. We could take a motion to endorse the 3 sequential strikes policy applicable to ownership groups if you wanted, but.
I move that the board take a 3 strikes. It would have to repeat that. A 3 strikes policy for ownership groups.
Okay.
Sorry, that was
I know what you mean.
a bad one.
Sorry. Yes.
How about this? I move that the board endorse a 3 strikes policy for ownership groups renewing late.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're almost back on track. We're still 20 minutes late, but let's see what we can do here. Woolly Mammoth extension request. Gabe, do you want to say anything more about this?
Yes, I'll try to be brief because in general, we don't want to comment too much about contested cases or take comment on contested cases. Your decisions there should be based on the record in the particular case. But what has occurred here is that this is a retailer that was discovered to have changed ownerships without authorization. That creates a disciplinary case, and the disciplinary case is moving along without contested issues and is not really a problem. What happened, though, is that you rendered a licensing decision based upon, after the change had already taken place, the board took up a licensing case and analyzed whether the ownership structure that had been achieved without prior approval was consistent with the one license rule at 901D3A. And the board said no. You came to the conclusion and published a written decision explaining that the affiliations between people were involved in the ownership of that retailer and another retailer were too close to be permitted under 901D3A. And the board in its order instructed the establishment to kind of get its stuff in order to put itself in a less, in a ownership structure that was more compliant in the board's view with 901D3A. The applicant did appeal that decision. The decision is now under appeal. It has been briefed by both sides, appellant and appellee, and it's pending oral argument within weeks. So it's quite far along. And what the establishment has said was just, please, can we defer can we stay the part of the order that tells us to straighten out our ownership structure to one you like until the appellate officer has weighed in on whether your opinion of what you would like is legally correct. In this case, I think my recommendation to you is that there is no harm to the public or third parties in doing that, and it probably is in the interest of justice. I know some people have expressed concerns about how does this sit with the board's general policy of not staying disciplinary decisions. And I think the answer to that is pretty well because it's not a disciplinary decision. If this were an issue of an unresolved disciplinary decision where there's somebody egregiously out of compliance with actual operating rules and they hadn't been corrected, there's a lot more public interest and market integrity interest in immediate effect. Here, the operation is operating in compliance in all respects concerning how it actually operates day to day. It's only ownership and the permissibility of the background investors that is disputed. So I have no trouble personally making the distinction between the disciplinary cases where a stay is not to be expected and it should be exquisitely rare, and licensing decisions where I think the board generally has taken the view that there's nothing particularly urgent and so has allowed stay. I think you also could consider the real, the practical timeline. The legal question should be settled by the appellate officer very soon. Once an appellate officer has taken a pass at the legal question and you've gone through, if you're affirmed at your first level of review, I think you've got a lot stronger case to think about, okay, there's been some process here. The one independent reviewer already has taken an appellate look at this. And of course, if the appellate officer reverses a decision, then good thing you good thing you made the choice you did. So all told, I see no harm in this. I do recognize arguments that we should be consistent in refusing stays, but I think that a case like this, because it is licensing, because it has no public safety implications, can be distinguished.
So this would not be a disciplinary issue. It's strictly a licensing issue, and that is where you're drawing the distinction?
Yes.
Okay.
And so it's not that it wasn't a disciplinary issue, it's that it was dealt with as a disciplinary issue. And NOV went out, it said, hey, we don't know whether buyer or seller did the bad thing, but the bad thing happened. And the establishment is not meaningfully contesting the underlying facts there.
Okay.
So if that makes any sense. So it's not as though the disciplinary issue was let slide. It was dealt with as a disciplinary issue, but the only pending matter is the licensing issue.
Gotcha. Okay.
More questions for Gabe on that?
Nope.
Okay, so is there a motion to grant the stay?
Are we thinking until the next board meeting, or are we thinking just timing help?
Maybe we time it to the appellate officer's decision in some way. Gabe, what do you suggest?
Just making sure.
You're muted.
Still muted.
Sorry about that. I was like, no one's listening to me. But I suggest that you wait out the appellate officer's decision. And as we talked about, once you've got the opinion of an independent, highly competent appellate authority, that might change the calculus about whether you want to defer more or defer enforcement more. But pending that, it's just a couple of weeks. So
Okay. Before I offered a motion, I just wanted to make sure that we were all on board.
Yeah,
timing sequence. Yeah. So I move that the board stay enforcement of its restructuring order until the appellate officer has rendered a decision on the matter under appeal.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. This next issue is again about grassroots, and I am continuing to be recused from this. Can I designate you as the chair for this portion of the agenda? Okay, I'm just going to step out.
Okay.
I can do the ethics dirty work if you want me to. I don't know how dirty it is, but there's a disclosure to be made. Julie, do you want me to briefly explain that, or would you prefer?
Oh, well, you can. I don't know. Yeah, that's fine. Well, do you want me to just declare my potential conflict? I can do that.
Yes, that's perfectly fine. And I should just add, great personal detail is not required, just the basic nature of it and why you intend to stay on.
Okay. So I'm trying to remember what I'm like. So my son is a medical cannabis user and shops at this location. However, any decision that we make as a board is not going to benefit him or my family any greater than it is anyone else who shops there. So there is part of the state statute, I'm sorry, I don't have the citation, that allows a board member to continue to make a decision if recusal would mean inaction. There's 2 of us left, as folks know, and if I recuse, then there can't be any action. So I'm remaining, and I believe that I can remain impartial in this decision.
Okay. Thank you for making that declaration. I guess I can, to the extent it is sought, which I'm never sure of. My view of this is that it is de minimis conflict in the sense that the only benefit that would come to you or your family would be the very abstract benefit that if it goes one way, your son would not have to get curbside service, or he'd be able to walk into a location, and that's about it. So seems small, but thank you for raising that issue and letting everybody know. And with that, I guess we're back to the grassroots matter. They did, grassroots had an outstanding balance. They cleared that, I understand, today. And I think we had just sort of deferred discussion of this. Originally, the board had voted to wait until something like December. And then you heard from the grassroots folks last month, and we're kind of continuing to weigh things up. All that has really changed in the meanwhile is that grassroots did submit a one-page statement of benefits that it expected to come to, that expected to offer patients in terms of accessibility at the proposed location, which would be, if approved, co-located with the manufacturing establishment that they're moving to South Burlington. The basic legal contours and considerations really have not changed since my first, kind of advice to you on this. It's really unclear what the General Assembly intended for the board to do in respect to the medical system. We have these on one hand, the dispensaries continue to exist in law as a distinct thing. On the other, we don't have a lot of the only instruction you really have from the General Assembly that's unambiguous about what they want the future to look like is to sort of merge the systems in a way that is consistent. So you have one set of lab standards, you have one set of licensing standards, you have one set of safety and security standards, instead of having the old pre-adult use market rules operating on one track for this tiny subset. So that makes, that raises some real questions about what is the appropriate thing for the board to do under the existing law when a dispensary wants to relocate. One of the things that I kind of did by way of background research that we discussed briefly at previous meetings was I looked at the old Department of Public Safety rules when the Department of Public Safety was responsible for administering dispensaries, the dispensary program, because there was no adult use program. At that time, the dispensary locations were very much land tied. There was an analysis of sort of demand in the area, something that we would today call like a siting analysis. There needed to be a showing of need, this kind of thing. Those rules, are essentially defunct under the APA because the entity responsible for the administration of them no longer exists. So I don't want to give too much weight. It's more by way of understanding legislative intent and the history here than it is that you should just pick up those rules and apply them like they were current law binding on you. They're really not. But it's just challenging because there's not a lot of instruction for the agency on what the General Assembly intended to have done with dispensaries. I think many people involved in the evolving adult use and medical market, where we have recently done things like we've seen the endorsement system, so that endorsed retailers are now by far the dominant site of access for patients. I think many of the folks involved in that were expecting that dispensaries would kind of fade away. And so is it appropriate or helpful to the goals of the General Assembly to authorize the opening of what is, for practical purposes, a new one? It would be relocated from quite a bit south. But so far, it's for all intents and purposes a new market. It's really not geographically in the same place at all. I know they've talked a little bit about their goal of providing delivery services. Their submissions talked a little bit about the unique accessibility to people with mobility disorders and challenges at this location. It would be not as crowded, would have some dedicated parking. But unfortunately, I sort of spent what advice I have to give you in terms of what's the right thing to do here. It's just not very clear. And then there is do you want to just stick to your original plan to defer until December and do some more digging around? I realize that this is not this matter of consequence for the dispensary and those folks. I don't mean to be whimsical about it, but there's just a lot of unanswered questions.
So I think I said this in our last meeting, but one thing I remember being very clear early on was that part of what at least I perceived our responsibility to have was the continuity of the medical program. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about it in those terms, but I also, I recognize that, to your point, Gabe, this is a new market for that particular dispensary, but it's going in right around the corner for where a medical dispensary existed for a really long time. So it would be sort of replacing, for lack of a better term, within, probably half a mile or a mile of where a different dispensary was for a really long time.
And I would just add that I don't have the number of patients under the age of 21 or from the 18 to 21 delta and then under 18 off the top of my head or in front of me, but I do believe a vast majority of them live in this general area, Chittenden County, but broadly in this area. You know, for the folks that didn't come to our mid-month June meeting, Julie and I had asked this business to kind of, you know, we don't really do market analysis for MUE. Any in good standing retailer can get an MUE. So I don't think it was prudent for us to force this business to kind of go down that route, but really talk more about this specific facility. What benefits does it have to the medical community? Of course, especially no matter where, depending on where you are in Chittenden County, as we've heard, certain types of medical patients aren't able to go into a medical dispensary or to a MUE endorsed retailer. So I'm starting to understand from my perspective the benefits to this. I don't know, Julie, how you feel. We did at one point put like a 6-month pause on this as we considered things. I don't know what new information we're going to learn in 6 months at this point, though.
I think in the last meeting I said I was ready to support this, and I still am. I thought more about the fact that this location is right around the corner from where one existed for a really long time, and really it's just picking up that business essentially where that business left off.
Can I ask just a point of clarification for licensing? Let's say we did allow this to move forward. What, I know you had a memo, I haven't had time to read it a couple times, but what's the process thereafter for this business?
So if this was approved for them to make that move, then they could submit their medical renewal.
Okay.
They will expire on 6/27 because they haven't submitted the renewal yet, but they would have the 60 days to be reinstated.
Okay. Sorry, I cut you off, Gabe.
No, I was just going to share the only data that I really have on this, which is that licensing did run an analysis of how many patients you are looking at between 18 and 21 who would be affected by this, you know, can you go in or not question. There are 34 patients in that category, of which 12 reside in Chittenden County. So you'd be a little bit more than a third of all the patients in that tranche are Chittenden County residents.
Okay. Julie, what are you thinking?
It seems like it would make sense, like you said. I don't know that we're going to get any new information. This business responded to all of the questions I think that we've had. It seems like we should move. We should probably vote on the relocation. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think I'm comfortable voting for relocation at this point.
Okay.
Is that something we should take a vote on, Gabe?
You're muted. It's just awkward because there's two of us. And which does the temporary chair make a motion, or does that?
Yes, I think
certainly want to be procedurally correct.
Either of you may make the motion, and I think the motion would just, I'm having some technical problems, but I think the motion would just be to approve the application of Grassroots to begin siting its planned dispensary outlet co-locating its planned dispensary outlet at the location in South Burlington where it is establishing its manufacturing outlet. Of course, they would have to finish their application process, which isn't very clear if I understand correctly. So you'd sort of be approving that in concept if you chose to vote today.
Can we just say approve their request for relocation?
Yeah, that was a long one. I didn't capture that fully in my head. Yeah, sorry about that. I move that the board approve the relocation request from Grassroots from Brandon to South Burlington.
Mm-hmm.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right. I think we're ready to get Pepper back.
That's right. We miss our chair.
That's good.
Okay.
I'm going to turn off my camera for just 1 minute while he comes back.
Oh, here he is. That's my new. Okay, I'm gonna get
Right.
yeah.
Executive Director report.
That's right.
Okay.
I've waited long enough. I think. Is it wait? What?
Sitting on the other side of the table, you know.
Yeah, I'm used to the arrangement. Oh. All right. Have probably a bit of a longer one today, so brace yourselves.
Okay.
It's a long day already. All right. So board, our executive director report, June 24th. As always, a quick look at the education and outreach initiatives. So what's coming in July is our compliance team leading an insights seminar focused on pesticide best practices. And of course, we would encourage members of our cultivator and propagator community to attend that session to learn directly from our compliance team, ask questions, and engage in a healthy discussion around compliance expectations and best practices. So July 8th is the date. Information could be for how to participate is on our website. And of course, Patrick will include that in the upcoming newsletter. Okay, moving on to our licensing data. A familiar chart here showing our active licensee counts over the course of 2 years. We are at 546 licenses, which you could see is 5 fewer than in a month ago. Well, that's the latest numbers here. Now, taking a closer look at our active licenses, broken up by type across the most recent 3 months. Purple is our June data. So this month's small changes impacting cultivators and manufacturers. And we also have so we are showing a loss of 4 cultivators and a loss of 2 manufacturers, plus a gain of a wholesaler. Who is a business that already has a manufacturing license. So that's the numbers here. And then just a quick look at the pie chart. Priority status, no changes in percent allocations months over months. On to the cultivator license data. Again, type and tier. So months over months, as I mentioned, we have an exit of 4 cultivators, including 1 indoor tier 1, 1 indoor tier 2, 1 mixed tier 1, and 1 outdoor tier 1. No changes in any other tiers or types. Okay, next, our manufacturing licenses. 2 tier 2 manufacturers left market in June. No changes in tiers 1 or 3 this month. Okay. So now I have a few slides, a couple slides on canopy capacity and utilization rate. So first, this is a familiar slide, just presented slightly differently. It's our licensed canopy capacity square footage. Indoor numbers are in light green, outdoor is in yellow. Total number stands for June at 805,000 square feet, which is about 15% or 16% down if you look back in the last June. So that's what we're showing here. But the gap between indoor and outdoor continues to narrow, you could see. Now, so here's a new slide for you, a little bit somewhat new. So this slide has information on canopy utilization rates broken up by tier. I know the board had discussed canopy utilization by our larger tiers earlier today already in relation to the relegation topic. But what we've tried to do for you on this slide and also another slide, the following slide, is to report in a way that's a little more useful and informative So in the past, we tried to present utilization rate across all cultivation type and tiers. But here and moving forward, we'll try to break this up a little bit better by smaller and larger cultivation tiers, because as you can see, there's quite a bit variation in the way different tiers utilize their canopy capacity. So again, if you look at this chart, right, you could probably tell the difference. I would note here that the figures are based on the information collected by our field staff over the course of the last 12 months. So this is not real-time data. So for some of our cultivators, numbers are from last September. For others, they're from last week. So again, there's more than 320 cultivators. That's what we have to do. Obviously, outdoor canopy information is collected during the growing season. Yeah, so I think percentage-wise, we're showing the tier 1s and 2s utilize approximately 43% of their canopy as a group, while our larger tiers are closer to 70%.
This is incredibly helpful. Oh, sorry, I thought you were done. This is incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. No, thanks to the team. I know our compliance agents have been in the field in the last few weeks getting us actual up-to-date information from tiers 3 through 5. So numbers here are very much current. And yes, and one more slide, which hopefully will be also quite welcome. So this slide provides further breakdown in the way that our licenses use the canopy. So now you're looking at the data broken down by the cultivation type and tier to show you any further variances. So again, you could quickly spot trends here with our indoor tier 1 and 2s and mixed tier 1s and 2s having the highest license capacity, but also the lowest utilization rate at about 35%. Our outdoor tier 1s and 2s at the bottom here at about 66% utilization rate. And our highest utilization rate is from our outdoor 3 through 5s at over 90%, as you can see.
I think one of the quirks, and especially range director talking with licensing about in anticipation of the board meeting, is we crafted a tier relegation rule, but the mixed tier, like this to me says that certain mixed tier folks are not using their indoor canopy. They might just be using outdoor or vice versa. Right. And as things are written right now, we can't just, the relegation doesn't consider taking 1/2 of your license. Right. So how do we kind of ask more pointed questions about why certain folks are not using a dedicated indoor or outdoor canopy and trying to kind of really understand what we should do moving forward there.
Yeah. Good thoughts.
Nuanced question that I didn't think of when we were writing that rule.
Me neither.
Yeah, but I have a note from Mike that yes, most mixed folks max out their outdoor capacity, and so it's the same trend.
We've allowed outdoor folks to maintain their genetics through the winter.
We have a wintering provision.
Because I think initially that was kind of the thought, but but we've allowed that subsequent to when we first created all these different tiers of licensing. So it's just something for us to kind of dig into and consider moving forward.
Okay, well, that's what I have for you on this. Again, great work by our data manager and our compliance team getting all of that for us. Okay, now just a quick look at the relinquishments. I think I've mentioned 6 businesses terminated their operations, 4 cultivation and 2 manufacturing. And as you could see here, 3 were our standard priority status, and then 1 social equity and 2 economic empowerment. And a quick look at the cessation of operation reasons from those 6 licensees. And again, usually businesses identify a few contributing factors with market access challenges and personal issues being more common reasons behind the licensee's decision to give up their licenses. So that's the licensing data here, and we'll take a look at the compliance and enforcement data next. So 78 inspections and 6 investigation-related visits had been conducted during the month of June. So you could see where our folks went. And this slide takes a look at the new investigations. Again, each color represents a different category of a license, and you could see we had 6 new investigations initiated and what those investigations are all about. I'll move on to the next slide here, our inspections. Again, just quick trends here. Our 78 inspections broken up with most of the inspectors visiting our cultivators in the month of June. Purple is the June data. Next is a look at the additional enforcement actions over the last 3 months. Usual mix of new complaints, a couple notices of violations, 4 cessations, and 7 destructions. I would note that the extra destructions were the result of contaminated or otherwise unusable product, and both crop and product destructions had been witnessed by our agents, as always. And now complaint types for June: advertising and various business operations complaints. Those are usually related to deficient record keeping, SOPs, etc. That's what we recorded for the month. Notices of violations. So the 2 we issued this month were in relation to advertising and product type violations. And that's the last slide for compliance. And now a quick look at our medical program. So as you could see, we continue to see our caregiver and patient count increase. So we've gained 29 new patients. I would flag that Melissa will do a deeper dive into the medical program and its recent trends shortly after I'm done with my presentation. So everybody stay tuned for that. We'll get a little more color on that. And the usual slide on the endorsed locations. Oh, that's a familiar slide. So next I have a special presentation here related to our 420 sales data. So our team has done a great job pulling together numbers from 2025 and 2026. And again, I'll be presenting that next. So this first slide offers a summary of total sales, and total number of participating retailers in the 420 week, which is what we've captured are the sales between April 17th and April 23rd of 2025 and 2026. And our 2025 data is in yellow, 2026 is in purple. The sales numbers are based on the sales from all retailers, including those operating with MUE. So you could see probably pretty quickly that year over year, the change in total sales revenue is very minor, just under 2% increase in total year over year sales number. And you could probably tell also that we had 7 more retailers participating. I would say when looking at this 2 sets of data together, we could probably see a sign of continued market maturation and stabilization. And as our market continues to evolve, this relative consistency in overall sales probably suggests some level of steadiness in consumer demand and also retail activity. I have a couple more slides to give you even more context and color around those numbers. So I'll show you the next slide here. So this one, here you could see a number of participating retailers in relation to the product categories they sold during the 420 event week. So figures are a bit small here, so I'll just pick a couple. If you look at topicals, right there, second from the bottom, in 2025, 46 retailers made sales of topicals, 50 retailers made sales in 2026. And if you look at vape cartridges, all participating retailers had sales both years. So most popular, obviously edibles and flower are up there as well. So we'll have folks can review other numbers as closer once we post this on the website. So now this is a detail on the product sales based on the product type. And I'll just highlight a couple examples here. So you could see at a glance that flower continues to be the top selling product category year over year, generating just over 2.1 million in sales during the reporting period each year. And topicals would be on the opposite end, with just under 6,000 in total sales during both reporting period. So if we were to really dig deeper into the numbers, we could probably tell that most product categories remained relatively consistent year over year, generally varying only by incremental amounts, with a primary exception being the vape cartridge sales, which increased approximately 15% or just over 89,000 year over year. Again, that's the most popular product based on the price slide. So it makes sense that there is a broad market demand for vape cartridges right now. Okay. So something we uncovered here. All right, a couple more slides here. So this slide just focuses on retailer participation per county during the same period. So to put this slide in a better context, the following slide, you'll see that one next, will provide some additional context by showing corresponding sales data on a per county basis. So this slide is intended to primarily identify the number of participating stores in each region. But when you put the two slides together, you'll see a comparison between retailer participation and sales activity on a county basis. One important note, you'll see that county level data for certain counties has been combined. We did that in the situations where there are fewer than 5 participating retailers to protect potentially sensitive sales information. So I will move on to the next slide. That's a little more interesting. And so here you're looking at the sales by county. And again, like I said, if you view it along the prior side, you'll see the sales activity relative to the number of stores. So you could get an average per store per county if folks were interested in that. Highest sales, of course, not surprisingly, were reported in the Chittenden County, which carries the largest concentration of retailers, followed by Windsor and Rutland. Additional data points here I want to flag. Year over year, the per county sales numbers are relatively stable, with just small increases in sales in a few counties. Addison, Bennington had a 10% year over year increase as a group. Rutland 13, Caledonia and Windham at around 8% each. And then we also saw counties such as Chittenden, Lamoille, Washington, and Windsor seeing some small decreases in sale totals. So a little bit of a mix, but overall pretty consistent year over year in those numbers. So that is what I have for you for 420. Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, great. Well,
thank you.
Yep. Yeah, to the team, I know
really...
we have amazing folks, and the work they're doing every day is special. All right, and now we move on to our staff recommendations.
Okay.
So I will start with initial. So we have a new manufacturer application for you. Today, they're new to the market. This is their first cannabis license application, and our licensing division recommends approval.
I move that the board approve the manufacturing license application of Cold Smoke LLC, Cold Smoke Cannabis.
A second.
Yeah. Oh.
Nope, sorry. Sorry, Julie.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. We got through the first one.
Yeah.
Have a few more. All right, so this is our staff recommendation for a medical dispensary license renewal for Vermont Patients Alliance. There are no outstanding requirements and fees have been paid, and our licensing division recommends approval.
I move that the board approve the dispensary license renewal of Vermont Patients Alliance.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next, I have 3 slides with timely, regular annual renewals. So first slide has all cultivators. Okay. So I'll go to the next page. Here's our second slide with timely, regular renewals, also all cultivators. And finally, one more slide of renewals. And again, our staff recommends approval for all licensees listed on this slide and the 2 prior slides.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
Yeah, I move that the board approve the renewal applications of the cannabis establishments displayed on the preceding 3 slides as recommended by the license division.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have a licensee looking to renew their license along with requesting an approval for a location change. They want to change their location from Brookline to Plymouth as a part of their regular renewal. The site in Plymouth is larger and better suited for their cultivation operations and is also owned by one of the business principals. The site has received a passing inspection. And of course, issuance of a renewed license will be contingent upon updated insurance for the new location. Plymouth does not have an LCC, and our licensing recommends this application for renewal.
Is there a motion to approve?
I move that the board approve the renewal application of Grass Tender LLC, including approval to relocate from Brookline to Plymouth as requested.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next, here we have New England Cannabis Partners, LCC, DBA Mother Plant. Originally an outdoor tier 2, they're looking for a location and a cultivation type change. Again, it's an outdoor tier 2 looking to become licensed as an indoor tier 2 and looking to change their location and move from Johnson to St. Albans. They recently purchased a building large enough to have their cultivation, manufacturing, and retail all together. And they intend to work through the amendment process to change the location of other licenses as well. In terms of the cultivation license in front of you, the new site has received a passing inspection, and this licensing division recommends approval here.
A motion to approve?
I move that the board approve the renewal application of New England Cannabis Partners, including the requested tier change and relocation from Johnson to St. Albans.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, next is a request for issuance of a license with an amended location. Clean Country Dispensary LLC operates an establishment in Johnson and operated, and then its regular meeting in January. The board approved the relocation in principle based on a finding that it would not complicate concentration issues. Since then, the business has had a passing site inspection and has met all administrative and licensing requirements. And at this point, our licensing team recommends that the board approve the amended license for issuance.
Are there any questions on this one for Gabe or Melissa's in the room or Olga or compliance?
I just have a clarifying question about, so they have an LLC in Cambridge, but they do not
LCC.
issue, sorry, what?
A local control commission, you mean?
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
But they don't actually issue a license, right? Because they have the ability to issue a local license, but it sounds like they don't do that part of it. Do I understand that correctly?
You mostly do. This is a complicated one in small towns. When
Right.
the General Assembly, to cut to the chase, the town did form a local control commission. However, the applicable statutes give local control commissions authority to condition the issuance of their licenses upon compliance with applicable ordinances and bylaws only, and no other basis. So, another way of saying that is the local control commission stands to verify that somebody is in compliance with ordinances and bylaws. In your October 2025 rule amendments, the board adopted a rule, which is, sort of common sense, that provides that the board will not or cannot recognize a local control commission in a town that has yet to adopt applicable ordinances or bylaws. And the reason for that is really simple. There's no way anybody could fail the test if there are no ordinances or bylaws applicable to them. And so allowing that would basically stand as a 45-day automatic delay for no reason. And so the law does not require or even allow you to consider formally LCC input from a town that doesn't have ordinances or bylaws to enforce. That said, town officials were really professional and communicative with us about issues there. I think there was some controversy about the proximity of the location to the school, so we double, triple, quadruple checked that the location is compliant with the state's existing buffer zone rule. The properties do not abut. It's a small, dense village area, so it is, when you've got a dense area, a lot of things are in one place, but the properties don't abut. And so we did have communication from the local control commission officials saying, listen, we understand that it was basically just advisory, but we took a vote. I think it was 2 in favor of approval, 0 opposed, and 3 abstaining. And the reason for the abstentions was that I had sent them a letter as a courtesy ahead of time saying, oh, you really don't have to do that because you don't have ordinances or bylaws. I don't want to waste your time. Of course, nothing wrong with an LCC that can't be formally recognized expressing its opinion on that matter. So basically you have 0 of the select board, which is the same as the LCC in that town, approving an advisory, or 0 opposing it in an advisory capacity, 2 approving, and 3 saying basically there's no reason for us to take any action here because they just tell us we don't have a formal role. So all of those answers are right, I guess. But so it's complicated.
Thank you.
And that's an artifact of the local control commission statute preceding the rule that said there must be ordinances or bylaws to enforce, because that rule only came into effect in October of 25.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Gabe, I've taken a lot of review of your analysis and pictures between this school and this business. I don't see much possibility of there being a line of sight between the two. There's an intervening row of buildings in between the school and this facility and this proposed location. And it's really just the back of the building. I think when we were talking about school buffers, we did what we thought we could do and what we did, but we really decided to focus in our authority on the outward aesthetic of the building to make sure that kids that might be walking past this building would not be exposed to brands, cannabis products, sales of cannabis. Obviously, consumption is not permitted either in the facility or outside of it. And that's where we really decided to focus our effort because we have very clear authority over that. Is that going to be the case here as well? I mean, from the kids that may not be able to see it from the school because of the intervening buildings, but the kids that are walking past this facility, are they going to be able to see branded products through the window or sales of cannabis or consumption of cannabis, as long as people are abiding by our rules, I should say?
No, they shouldn't. And that's something that I've really tried to impress upon. We've heard a lot from a lot of people who are concerned about this. And probably the principal thing that would allay most of those concerns would be checking out our advertising rules. As you and I know too well, our advertising rules are reviled by some folks because they're kind of strict. But they impose much more strict rules about the visibility of products, about the number of signs, et cetera, than apply to a gas station, than apply to a liquor store. I can't pull in to get a tank of gas without my kids seeing 5 signs for Zins. Whereas if you were walking children past a cannabis establishment that complies with your advertising rules, it should be about as interesting as a plumbing supply store. To somebody who's looking for a cannabis establishment, they could probably tell it's a cannabis establishment, but it is not permitted, as we all know, to have products visible even through windows. Windows are regarded as independent displays that have to be approved as advertising. So if you've seen a cannabis establishment, you know their windows are all opaque or covered with some non-cannabis thing. Gratuitous cannabis iconography would be regarded as an additional sign. You're only allowed the single attached sign and maybe a sandwich board. I think if folks are concerned about this being an obtrusive presence in the village setting, having a look at those advertising rules may offer a lot of comfort that it should be an inobtrusive presence there. And, end of the day, a lot of time was spent in years past discussing what the buffer zone rule should be. A lot of thought and debate went into the buffer zone, settling on the buffer zone rule that the board attached. Part of that came out of a desire, I believe, to be consistent with the statutory school buffer zone applicable in some sentencing matters. It just said, okay, it just makes sense to have one, not to develop these parallel rules. And that rule, when applied, says that this is permissible in terms of the location. And you as a board have a great deal of authority to deal with, inappropriate conduct. And we don't have, I think we've maybe had 1 or 2 public consumption complaints years ago. They were dealt with very swiftly, and those problems did not recur. So my hope is that this would be something that everybody finds acceptable, but at the end of the day, the board has discretion really only to apply the citing rule that it has adopted, and that citing rule does give the result that this is permitted. So with that said, it's a path. The path is clear in terms of the legal requirements.
I'm ready. Julie, any other questions for Gabe or the team?
No, thank you.
I think I'll just say one last thing. It's more of a comment than a question, though, which is we really grappled with that citing rule, retail citing rule, because we knew that the unique characteristics of every of our 250 towns is different, and the desires of their residents are going to be different. Some people may really want these things in a walkable area. They may want them close to a law enforcement station or along existing police routes. If there are issues, public safety issues, they may want them in various places. And we, sitting here in Montpelier, have a hard time creating a one-size-fits-all rule that's going to accommodate every town's individual needs. So we did what we thought was right, which was set a floor to the citing rule. We followed the drug-free school zone because it's well-trodden ground. It's kind of how the legislature has decided to protect kids from being exposed to sales of illicit drugs. And so, I just feel like we, as Gabe mentioned, we have to hold ourselves to what we pass. We can't just make individual determinations. So I think I'm ready to take a motion to approve this request.
I move that the board approve issuance of the retail cannabis license of Clean Country Dispensary to operate at its amended site in Cambridge.
Second?
Any other discussion?
No.
No.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next. Here is a request to add a principal or controller pursuant to Rule 1.17. In this case, both Burn Legacy Cannabis LLC and Burn Living Organics LLC, same ownership, asked to add a new principal who will hold a 2% equity. The new principal is a family member of the majority owners, and they have completed affiliations checks with no concerns. Licensing team recommends approval of this ownership change for both businesses.
Any questions on this? No. Is there a motion to approve the ownership change?
I move that the board approve the request of Burn Legacy Cannabis and Burn Living Organics to add a principal.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay, next. We also have an establishment seeking to amend their retail license mid-cycle to add a medical endorsement. This business is applying for their medical use endorsement for the first time, and it is recommended by our licensing team to issue an approval. Of course, our Rule 3.43b requires enhanced training, and from what we understand, this licensee has 4 employees signed up for training to take place tomorrow. So hopefully it will take care of that.
Okay.
So yes, an approval is recommended.
Is there a motion to approve?
I move that the board approve issuance of a medical endorsement to Devil's Den Cannabis.
Second?
For a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, next. So that's the first month. So this month we have 2 applicants that are looking to graduate into higher tier as permitted in Rule 1.3.4. Both of these licensees presented documentation to the board during the May board meeting, and at the time satisfied the requirements to show that the proposed graduation is consistent with the purposes of Rule 1.3.4. At the time, they were given approval to begin the licensing process to tier up. Both licensees have since completed the application process, paid their fees, and our licensing team recommends approval. Yeah.
Questions?
No.
No.
Is there a motion to approve?
I move that the board approve the applications of Warm Green and Moonlight Cultivation to graduate from Tier 1, Tier 2 as permitted by Rule 1.3.4.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Next, we have 4 late but now complete renewal applications for the board to review. The narratives and timelines for each had been shared with the board already. I would note that 3 out of 4 renewed late in the past. 2 out of 4 submitted their renewal applications past their deadlines. And 2 out of them were still working with our licensing team on submitting their fees or licensing materials as of yesterday afternoon. And I know I mentioned it in the prior meetings. It is truly only because of the efficiency of our licensing team in processing information, communicating with businesses, and doing a substantial amount of follow-up work to support such late renewals that this renewal applications are even in front of the board today. At this point, our licensing team has everything they need, and they do have a favorable recommendation. But of course, it's up to the board on whether to take these applications up and approve renewals.
I wasn't evaluating our 3-strike policy when I was reviewing these memos. So I can't speak. I did notice that some were late in the past, but I feel like I'm willing to give these folks the benefit of the doubt this time, knowing that, what did you say, 3 out of the 4 are now on their 2nd strike, at least. So
if you're listening, please next year plan a little bit further ahead.
Yeah. Any questions for licensing? Melissa is in the room, by the way. Julie.
Yeah, I heard her before. Yes, no, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that the board accept and approve late application renewals of the 4 listed establishments with the warning that future late submissions may be rejected.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, next I have for you our first laboratory license renewal since the state reference laboratory began operations with a lab director and staff. So I want to flag that the renewal has been more technical than in the past, including a full review of Rule 1.8 requirements with this licensee. At this point, issues still need attention before our staff are comfortable making a favorable recommendation. So this licensee is due to expire on July 8th. And after some consultations internally, our general counsel recommends accepting the late application as sufficient pursuant to Rule 115.2b, but deferring a decision today in favor of a written decision, with the goal of having that available and published before July 8th.
Any questions on this one?
So I know that there's details. I did not see them until right before the meeting. So if we're deferring, does that mean we will deliberate at some point? What would be the next step in the process, Gabe?
It does. It had been the hope of the laboratory staff to have been, in a position to have everything submitted so they could recommend approval by Friday, which is sort of the practical deadline to get things under your review today. That wasn't possible. Fortunately, the natural expiration date will be July 8th. So what I've recommended to you is that you don't reject the late application. You could accept it under 1.15.2b, meaning you will consider it on the merits, but defer a merits decision and just make that decision in writing, which you are permitted to do without convening a new meeting. You can simply publish the decision. It'll be a public record when you publish it, so it's no secret from anybody. That has 2 benefits. One is that it buys some time. It buys until July 8th for the parties to work together so that you have a fuller set of information to deliberate on. And if there were things hanging you up, you might have them resolved by then. And the second is that a written medium is more appropriate to laboratory renewals. Unlike most of the licensees that you have, the laboratories are kind of in a special place because continuous quality improvement is part of their ordinary processes. And there's never not kind of constant ongoing review. This is also, as you talked about a little bit earlier in this section of the meeting, this is the first year where we have a fully functional state reference laboratory that can apply all of the Rule 1.8 requirements for to the laboratory and have a good look at them. So it's just a more complicated than usual process. So for all those reasons, I think rather than doing it on the fly here, it makes some sense to recommend to you that you buy some time and buy some detail by putting this off to a written decision to be finished around the 8th. And I think to answer your simple question, yes, you would deliberate. It's quasi-judicial in character, so you would be able to deliberate without convening a new meeting, and your decision would explain your thinking.
Yeah. Okay, great. I'm so glad to have scientists on our team. I couldn't be happier about that. But then also, I just wanted to make sure we had a chance to deliberate, and I totally understand why we didn't have the memo. That's totally fine. Just so long as we get a chance to deliberate.
Yes, there should be ample time for that. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, please finish your thought.
There should be ample time for you to deliberate. And I should say, under the Administrative Procedure Act, if you decide you need more time to deliberate beyond July 8th, the license is held in full force and effect until you deliver your decision. So another way of saying that is you are allowed as much time as you need. We're made it a goal to have an answer by July 8th, just because that's the set renewal date.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And that any written decision from the board is a public document, right?
It is, yes. It's no secret. It's, anybody can see it. And they're appealable like all board decisions.
Great. Okay. All right. Is there a motion to?
I move that the board, I think obviously it's clear from the renewal materials available to us today that state lab staff are working through unresolved issues with BIA to afford them some time. And because laboratory renewals are inherently technical, I move that we accept BIA's late application for processing pursuant to Rule 1.15.2B, but take the matter under advisement with the goal of publishing a written decision for BIA's pending expiration date, July 8th, 2026.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. The last slide.
Okay.
So close. So finally, I have here for you an expired manufacturer license that falls within the 60-day reinstatement period permitted under Rule 115.2D. The board has received those materials applicable. When the license expired in May, they went through the necessary steps to cease operations as directed by their compliance agent. And since the expiration, they were successful in providing our licensing division with the missing documentation to qualify for renewal. And at this point, our staff recommends that the board exercises its discretion in accepting and reviving this license. If reinstated, the expiration date will remain May 24th.
Any questions on this one?
Nope.
Is there a motion?
I move that the board approve reinstatement of the manufacturing license of FWR Inc. doing business as Grassroots.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's what I have for you here.
All right, and we saved the best for last.
A couple, two items.
Oh, two items. Oh, sorry.
Small
So
one,
best
but
for
it's pretty
second to last.
second to last.
Yeah.
Penultimate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
While you're setting that up, I would just note that Melissa has been with the medical program for longer than any of us have been with the CCB.
No. We're so lucky.
Yeah.
So lucky.
Okay, if I do this, do I see my notes? I do. Okay, great. Okay. All right, so this little data set here is in response to the board's request for some data reflected in the active patient counts that have gone up in the last year. So everything here is June 1st, 2025 to June 1st, 2026. So starting off with program numbers, the active patient count from 6/1/25 to 6/1/26 has risen from 2,748 patients to 3,294 patients. That is an increase of 546. Of those, 387 are initial applicants, which in our system means they are a first-time patient. This is the first time they've ever entered our system. 238 of those are renewal applicants. And in our system, that means anybody who has been an active patient in the past, regardless of a lapse in active status. So you may notice that the initial applicants plus the renewal applicants equals more than the 546 increase. That's because 79 of those renewals were true renewals without a lapse in licensure. So they did not contribute to the rise in active patient count over the last year. Out of those 238 renewals received in the last year, 158 were returning patients who had a card lapse at some point in time and were coming back into the program. So the following data is specific to initial applicants, not the ones who have renewed. These are just for the people who are first time coming in. So we had 267 providers complete 387 healthcare professional verification forms. So the majority of those providers filled out one form each. So 74% of those providers filled out one form for one patient. That was it. And then 49 of those providers filled out two forms. Yep. And then you can see it goes down 3, 4, 5. Those ones are, when you look at them closer, it's more providers who are in family practices in more highly populated areas, so they have more patients, or they are specialists. They're an oncologist, and all of the people that they're filling out forms for are cancer patients. Exactly. The little outlier here of 11 forms each from 2 specific providers sort of coincides with our rule change about online healthcare providers. So they have not completed any forms in 2026 total. We sort of, put the stop to that when the rule changed before they could be. Now they can't. So they have been sort of taken out of the fold there.
And people still, we have a hardship element for telehealth. Right? Yes.
That's true. Yes. If somebody has a situation where they aren't able to get their regular physician to fill out the form, we will accept the form from an online healthcare provider as long as they can provide notes from their other provider showing the same diagnosis. So we have ways around that for people who really need it. And of those providers, those 267 providers that filled out forms in the last year for initial patients, this is sort of just the breakdown of what type of provider they are, mostly MDs and APRNs. Just an interesting little tidbit of
Nobody
providers.
says they're an architect, which is good.
Yeah, exactly. So qualifying medical conditions. So to become a registered patient, you must have a qualifying medical condition as defined by 7 VSA 951. Other indicates a condition that is not listed but does produce one or more listed symptoms, and we'll get into those on the next one. So if you do the math, you'll see that this adds up to 401, which is more than the 387 initial patients. And that's because some people have more than one qualifying diagnosis. So for the people that do have multiple diagnoses, all but one of those, the other column was the secondary diagnosis. And then looking a little bit more into that other section, if somebody has a diagnosis that is not one of the listed diagnoses, but does produce one or more of the following symptoms, then that counts as a qualifying condition. So those 4 symptoms that we look at are cachexia, chronic pain, severe nausea, and seizures. So of the 223 people that had a qualifying condition in the other category, this was the symptom that was produced in order to make it qualifying. And so again, there's a little more here. There's 238 total because some people have more than one symptom for their qualifying condition. And that's it. That's
great.
Just a look at what the medical's done in the last year.
So it's our intention to do a follow-up patient satisfaction survey. We did one in, I think, December of 23. And I know we've got a lot of questions kind of worked out. We worked with other states on what types of questions should be asked. But I think what our goal is to have the medical use endorsement in place for at least some amount of time. So that, you know, when it comes to questions of access and product selection, that we have at least can capture how the medical use endorsement has changed some of the baseline data that we have from that 23 survey. So just putting that out there. Yeah.
Still the plan.
Still the plan.
Still the
Yes.
plan.
Yeah. And I know, but it actually does feel like a lot of the kind of issues that we saw around access, around quality, around affordability we've been kind of like laser focused at turning around. And I think that, you know, patients are experiencing unprecedented access and lower prices and better quality. And, you know, of course, the experience, I don't want to denigrate it's still prior to this, but we have an advanced enhanced blood tender training now. And I think the medical program, I mean, we're seeing a positive uptick, which is not true in most other states.
Yeah. Do you, if folks have a medical card, they can go on our website, right, to figure out who has an MUE? Is that right?
Yes.
Like, how do they know where to shop? Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Last thing on our agenda is I think what we want to do is we've been kind of operating with this mid-month evidentiary hearing. I think we want to just we just want to formalize that and stop being in special meetings and just adopt them as regular meetings.
Administrative, I think Gabe should probably say a few words,
Okay,
because
Gabe,
I think we want to limit what is discussed in terms of policy kind of considerations, the safe for the regular meetings, and mid-month is more of administrative in nature. Gabe, do you want to say a few words on the mid-months?
Sure. Pepper pretty much got it in a sentence at the beginning. When early in the board's history, it met very frequently, met at least twice a month. And then at some point it was decided that was too frequent, and we went to end of month regular meetings. Following that, we realized that we needed some hearing time periodically when there was a licensing hearing or when it was necessary for the board to take testimony in order to make an informed decision on an issue before it. And so we started these mid-month meetings, and they were called evidentiary hearings because that's what was going on at the time. And they were scheduled as special meetings because they weren't all the time. They were only as the need presented itself. But you've kind of fallen into a process, which probably really for good reasons, where you're using the mid-month meeting to clear administrative and procedural necessaries and saving the substantive policy discussion for the end of month meeting as always. But that resulted in a situation where the original name is a bit of a misnomer now. It's not a special meeting because you're having it every month, and it's not an evidentiary hearing meeting because more often than evidentiary hearings, you're clearing administrative matters that just, so they don't need to be delayed unduly. So the recommendation really is to just true those up to what they actually are. Settle these as regular mid-month meetings in addition to your regular end of the month meeting, but clarify that the purpose is still limited, as it always has been, to kind of non-policy specific case matters, where it's necessary to take care of administrative niceties without delaying people. And that you're really not going to have a full agenda like we did today at these mid-month meetings. They should only be for the very limited administrative and ministerial things you need to get done on a tighter schedule. So I hope that explains, but that's really all.
The dates here, but are there any questions for Gabe about what he's just said, what he's presented?
Nope.
So the dates shouldn't be a surprise to any of us. It's the same kind of mid-month, the kind of this 2 weeks after a traditional board meeting. So it's July 15th, it's August 12th, it's September 16th, October 14th, and then because of the holidays, we're not doing November or December because those already are going to fall mid-month, and they're always at 1 o'clock. And we'll update our calendar to reflect that. Yeah, come join us.
Okay, well, that makes me feel better because people are like, what are these administrative, what are these hearings that aren't hearings? And of course, if you have no business, you can always cancel the meeting. So, but I think this works out.
Okay.
Should we vote to accept?
Yes, yeah. Is there a motion to approve the meeting schedule for the mid-month administrative board meetings?
I move that the board switch from special evidentiary hearing meetings to administrative meetings on a regular basis with the dates that were just mentioned by the chair.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay. Anyone want to add anything to the agenda? No? Nope.
Pepper,
All
before
right,
we
yeah.
close, do you want to
Yes.
just say again the 5 work groups and how to just say the email address again, just for the people? I'm
Yes.
so impressed at the 27 people who hang on for all this time.
Yes. Yeah. So it's the cannabis products work group, and that's going to include equivalencies and extended product registrations. It's the event pilot, it's hemp, it's rescheduling, and it's retail siting. So if anyone listening or anyone watching this would like to participate in any one or all of those, and we haven't created a structure for it quite yet, but if there's interest in participating or at least knowing about those, email ccb.info@vermont.gov. In the subject line, write work group or some way for us to easily identify that that's the subject matter. And in the body of the email, put your name, your contact info, and which work group or work groups you'd like to be involved in.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. And I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you.